Our story tonight takes us to Edwardian London and Narnia's first dawn. In an Edwardian London attic, Diggory, Kirk, and Polly Plummer are drawn into Uncle Andrew's dangerous experiment with enchanted rings. Their journey leads through the wood between the worlds, across the silent ruins of Charn, and finally into the first darkness, where Aslan begins to sing Narnia into being. At an attic window in London, during the autumn of 1908, you stand beneath a small roof pane while rain softens the city below. The Edwardian years have settled over London with soot-darkened brick, polished manners, horse-drawn cabs, and patient domestic routines. Around you, the old house rises narrowly through several stories, divided into attic rooms beneath the sloping roof. Dust lies thick across the floorboards, gathering in corners where the muted London light cannot reach. The air smells of coal smoke, old timber, damp wool, and the faint sweetness of forgotten paper. Far below, wheels pass over wet streets with a softened rumble, while footsteps echo through adjoining rooms. A pipe knocks once inside the wall, and then the house becomes still again. In this quiet London house, you find Polly Plummer exploring the attics with the calm confidence of a child, accustomed to making secret kingdoms from ordinary places. Polly lives next door, and because the neighboring houses stand close together, their upper rooms nearly touch beneath the roofs. A narrow opening in the dividing wall allows you to pass from one attic into another, provided you move carefully among the beams and trunks. Polly has crossed that boundary several times before Diggory Kirk appears. She has discovered old chairs, broken picture frames, bundles of string, and a hidden corner where the rain cannot reach. You watch Polly kneel beside a gap in the boards, brushing dust from a brass button with one fingertip. Her hair catches the weak light from the roof window, and her shoes make almost no sound against the timber. A strand of cobweb clings to the sleeve of her dress. Somewhere beyond the wall, another room waits in silence. The smell of coal smoke drifts upward from the chimneys, mingling with the dry scent of old wood. Rain taps gently upon the roof tiles, softened by plaster and distance. Below the rafters, London continues its errands without knowing that two attic rooms have become a country of their own. Diggory Kirk enters this hidden country after moving into the house with his mother's sister, because his mother is ill and cannot care for him at home. You meet him standing awkwardly in the doorway, uncertain whether Polly has permitted his arrival. His clothes are respectable but slightly rumpled from travel, and his expression carries the strain of a child who has heard too many adult voices fall quiet. He tells Polly that his name is Diggory Kirk. He tells you that his father is away in India. He tells you that his mother is very ill. The words come plainly, but the sadness behind them rests heavily between the children. Polly does not answer with pity, because pity would make the attic feel smaller and more uncomfortable. Instead, she asks Diggory whether he has seen the passage behind the chimney breast. He looks towards the wall, then follows her across the dusty boards. Their footsteps echo through adjoining rooms, traveling farther than either child expects. The connected attics stretch across several houses, forming a long hidden corridor beneath the roofs of London. You move with them through rooms containing cracked mirrors, rolled carpets, and boxes whose labels have faded into grey shapes. The passage seems to invite exploration, and the children begin treating it as a place for play. A narrow beam of daylight enters through a small roof window, carrying a silver haze of dust across the room. Each particle turns slowly in the air before settling upon the floorboards again. The timber beneath your feet feels dry and slightly rough, worn smooth where generations of servants once crossed. Rain-softened street sounds rise from below, mixed with the distant clatter of a tram and the muffled cry of a newspaper boy. In the adjoining rooms, the children's movement becomes a delicate sequence of creaks, whispers, and brief taps against the walls. Coal smoke enters through a chimney gap, leaving a dark, familiar taste in the air. Nothing appears magical. The attic remains entirely ordinary. Diggory and Polly soon give names to their territories, though the names belong only to them and disappear whenever an adult comes near. One room becomes the cave, another the desert, and a third the palace where broken furniture forms a throne. They cross from house to house without descending into the street, crawling beneath rafters and stepping over beams. You see Polly leading the way with a candle stub, while Diggory carries a length of string to mark their route. The string slips around a nail and trails behind them like a pale line through the dust. Their discoveries make the old London houses seem larger than the city itself. A brown veil of weather presses against the roof window, turning the light soft and indistinct. The boards hold the warmth of the afternoon only faintly, and the upper air feels cooler than the rooms below. You smell old timber where the children lean against the beams, and coal smoke where the chimney narrows above their heads. Paper rustles inside a forgotten box. A loose length of string trembles when a draft passes through the wall. Metal gives a small, dull clink beneath a folded blanket. Beyond the roof, rain continues to fall upon London, and the street sounds arrive as though carried through wool. The attic keeps its secrets gently. Diggory's playfulness fades whenever Polly asks about his family, and you feel the change in him before he speaks. He explains that his mother is ill in the bedroom below, and that her illness has made the house strangely careful. Voices are lowered near her door. Curtains remain partly drawn even during the day. His aunt moves quietly, while the servants carry trays and hot water through the passage. Diggory hopes that his mother will recover, although he has heard adults discussing doctors, journeys, and the possibility that recovery may not come. He does not know what will happen to her, nor how long he must remain in London. Polly listens while the rain gathers in the gutters outside. She does not promise that everything will become well, because children can understand when promises are too large. Instead, she offers Diggory the attic passage, the secret rooms, and the possibility of another afternoon spent away from the quiet bedroom below. You see the friendship begin without ceremony. It grows through shared discoveries, whispered plans, and the simple relief of being understood. Diggory's sorrow remains beside him, but it is no longer the only thing in the room. The old house gives the children space enough for laughter, though their voices remain low beneath the rafters. Muted light rests upon the floor like a thin layer of water. Dust has gathered in the grooves between the boards, and each footprint leaves a darker shape before the dust slowly settles again. The small roof window shows only a blurred section of sky, pale above the chimneys and dark where the rain thickens. A draught moves beneath the door, bringing the smell of wet stone from the street. Somewhere downstairs, a kettle begins to murmur. Somewhere farther away, a door closes with a restrained wooden thud. The adjoining rooms return to silence, but that silence feels inhabited now, as though the empty house has accepted the children's presence. One afternoon, Polly and Diggory decide to investigate a section of attic beyond their usual boundary. They have reached the farthest room in one direction, but a second opening appears behind a stack of old packing cases. The opening is narrower than the others and covered by a board fastened with a rusty nail. Polly removes the nail with a hairpin while Diggory holds the candle. Beyond the board, you find another passage, lower and darker, leading towards houses they have never entered. The children suspect that the roofs may connect all along the street. Their discovery turns exploration into a larger adventure. The hidden passage smells of damp plaster, cold ash, and timber that has absorbed many winters. The candle flame leans whenever the air moves, casting a long amber shape over the wall. Dust lies undisturbed, except where mice have crossed it, leaving tiny tracks beside the children's shoes. Their footsteps echo strangely, sometimes close beside you and sometimes far ahead. Through one cracked roof pane, London appears as a pattern of wet chimney pots, shining gutters, and blurred brick. Rain-softened sounds drift upward from the street, losing their sharpness before reaching the rafters. The passage remains narrow, but the world beyond it feels unexpectedly wide. Diggory and Polly return to the house with a growing sense that the attics contain more rooms than any sensible building should possess. They make maps upon scraps of paper and argue softly about the direction of the passages. Polly believes the next opening must lead into the house beyond Diggory's. Diggory thinks they may already have crossed beneath 3 separate roofs. The game becomes a serious investigation, though neither child yet imagines another world. You hear them whispering plans beside the chimney breast, unaware that a man below has begun listening. Uncle Andrew Ketterley has noticed their movements. He has noticed Polly's name. He has begun to consider her usefulness. Andrew Ketterley occupies a locked study on the floor beneath the attics, where the air feels warmer, drier, and more sharply scented than elsewhere. He is Diggory's uncle, a tall and unsettling man with a careful voice and an interest in knowledge that has led him into secret places. The household calls him peculiar, but the story gives him a more precise description. Andrew is a magician who has experimented with occult knowledge. His books concern old rituals, hidden forces, and powers that respectable London families prefer not to discuss. While Polly and Diggory explore above him, Andrew listens through the ceiling and quietly forms an experiment around them. The study door is made of dark wood, polished near the handle by years of use. A brass lock catches the dim light, and the key remains almost always in Andrew's possession. From beneath the door comes the dry scrape of paper, string, and metal being arranged upon a table. The smell of dust is stronger there, mixed with sealing wax, lamp oil, and something bitter from a glass bottle. A narrow strip of light lies across the landing. Your footsteps seem louder in that passage, although no one else is present. From the attics above, Polly and Diggory move through the beams, and Andrew measures their distance without revealing himself. The next day, Andrew arranges for Diggory to be absent when Polly climbs into the attic. He sends a message, gives an instruction, and creates the appearance of ordinary household business. Polly comes alone, expecting another afternoon of exploration. You see her cross the attic passage with one hand upon the wall, feeling for the hidden opening behind the packing cases. Before she reaches it, Andrew appears at the edge of the room. He speaks politely. He tells her that Diggory is occupied. He invites her downstairs. His manner is gentle enough to be trusted by a child, but his attention remains fixed upon the locked study. The stairwell holds the cool smell of plaster and wet coats. Light from the landing window touches the banister in pale strips, leaving the steps below in shadow. Polly's shoes make a soft rhythm as she follows Andrew downward. Somewhere beneath the house, a clock counts the quarter hour with a muted metallic note. The study door opens, and warmer air moves across your face. Inside, paper covers the desk, string loops around small instruments, and pieces of metal rest upon folded cloth. A lamp burns steadily beside a stack of books. Rain has softened the city into a distant murmur, while the locked room gathers its own silence. Andrew leads Polly across the study and closes the door behind her. He tells her that Diggory has been unfairly secretive about the attics, and that a small test will allow him to make amends. Polly does not understand why the experiment requires secrecy. She notices the books, the bottles, and the strange arrangements upon the table. Andrew smiles with an expression that tries to appear harmless. Then he places a yellow ring upon her finger. The ring seems warm despite the coolness of the room. Before Polly can remove it, the air around her changes, and she vanishes from the study without a cry. The yellow ring leaves only a faint impression of warmth upon the skin. The chair where Polly stood remains in place, and a little dust drifts through the space above it. Andrew's lamp continues to burn beside the papers. A thread of string slips from the table and touches the floor. Metal clicks softly as one instrument settles against another. Through the walls, you hear the old house breathing in its usual manner, with pipes, boards, and distant doors. Yet the room has altered. One child has disappeared, and the rain-softened sounds beyond the walls seem suddenly very far away. Andrew looks towards Diggory's room, already preparing the second part. Diggory enters the study in confusion, carrying the uneasiness of a child who has discovered that something has gone wrong. Andrew tells him that Polly has gone home, but Diggory knows this cannot be true. He demands an explanation, and Andrew reveals the rings. The yellow ring, he says, carries a person away. The green ring brings that person back. He does not explain where Polly has gone. He speaks instead of forces, experiments, and knowledge collected through years of occult study. Diggory understands that Andrew has used Polly without permission. When Andrew refuses to follow her himself, Diggory sees that courage has been placed upon him like an unwanted burden. The study lamp throws a calm yellow circle across the desk. Outside that circle, the shelves fade into brown shadow, and the locked door appears heavier than before. The dry scrape of paper continues beneath Andrew's restless fingers. String lies coiled beside a silver instrument, while small pieces of metal reflect the lamp in thin, cold flashes. You smell old timber in the walls and the faint coal smoke entering from the chimney. Rain touches the window with patient fingers. Down in the London street, a carriage passes, its wheels muffled by wet ground. The ordinary sounds remain, but they no longer seem to belong entirely to the ordinary world. Diggory takes the green ring because Polly is alone somewhere beyond the study, and because Andrew has made every other choice impossible. He says farewell to the familiar room without knowing whether he will return. The yellow ring waits upon Polly's hand in a place he cannot imagine. The green ring rests against his finger, bright and cool. Andrew gives directions quickly, warning him not to touch the rings except at the proper moment. The instruction is precise, but it does not make the situation less frightening. You stand beside Diggory as he raises his hand. The study, the old house, and the London rain begin to lose their certainty. For a moment, you remain within the narrow Edwardian house. You can still feel the floor beneath your feet, and you can still hear the rain against the window. The smell of paper and metal surrounds you. Then the green ring touches Diggory's skin, and the study falls away. There is no staircase, no ceiling, and no familiar wall. The movement is silent, yet it carries the strange sensation of sinking through warm darkness. London disappears first as a collection of sounds, then as a smell, then as an idea. The locked study becomes distant. Andrew Kettley becomes distant. Only the yellow ring and Polly remain ahead. The darkness around you is not empty. It has a softness like deep water, though no water touches your face. Your hands feel suspended, and your body seems lighter than it should. No footsteps echo here. No rain reaches this place. The dry scrape of paper and string has vanished, leaving a silence without edges. A faint warmth rests against your skin, perhaps from the ring, perhaps from the hidden force carrying you onward. You sense no direction, yet you are moving. The old timber, the coal smoke, and the London streets have been folded away. Beyond them lies a larger quiet, patient and immeasurable. Diggory finds Polly beside a pool in a strange wood, and the children understand that Andrew's rings have carried them somewhere beyond London. They stand among trees whose leaves shine with deep green stillness. Pools lie between the trunks, each one dark, smooth, and perfectly calm. Polly is angry with Andrew, and Diggory is ashamed that he followed without knowing how to protect her. Yet their friendship steadies them. They speak of returning home, though the yellow and green rings are no longer merely objects from a locked study. They are now the means by which the children may cross between worlds. The wood is quiet enough for every small sound to remain distinct. A leaf loosens from a branch and touches the moss without a noticeable fall. Water rests inside the nearest pool, reflecting the trees with almost no movement. The air carries the scent of damp earth, green bark, and flowers that have no familiar name. Beneath your shoes, the ground feels soft and springy, thick with moss. The darkness between the trunks is gentle rather than threatening. No London carriage passes here. No chimney sends coal smoke into the sky. The silence has the breadth of a place that has existed since before any house, street, or human voice. The children return through the pools and eventually reach a world that is not their own, where an empty city waits beneath a dark sky. There they find an ancient bell, a ruined palace, and Queen Jadis, whose pride and power have destroyed her people. Diggory wakes her by striking the bell, though he does not yet understand the consequence he has set in motion. Jadis follows the children when they escape. She comes through the wood, through the pools, and finally into the ordinary streets of Edwardian London. The old house receives an impossible guest beneath its rain-darkened roof. London feels smaller when Jadis enters it, though the streets remain crowded with familiar objects. Wet cobbles shine beneath the lamps. Hoarse breath rises pale in the evening air. Shop windows hold rows of ordinary goods, and rain gathers along the gutters. Beneath the rafters, however, the children carry the weight of another world. Andrew's study still smells of paper, string, metal, and coal smoke. The old attic passages still connect one house to another. The same floorboards receive the children's feet, yet the household can no longer be called untouched. The quiet domestic setting has become a threshold, and the threshold has begun to open. The story you are entering was written by C.S. Lewis and first published in 1955 by the Bodley Head in London. Its place among the Narnia books has a curious history. The Magician's Nephew was the sixth Narnia book published, arriving after readers had already travelled through other doors and met other children. Later, Lewis intended the book to stand first in the chronological reading order. Its plot reaches backwards, explaining the origin of Narnia before the adventures that occur there. Yet its opening remains firmly placed in ordinary domestic London, where illness, secrecy, attics, and childhood friendship come before the appearance of other worlds. The rain has weakened now, and only a few drops touch the roof. The attic floor feels cool beneath your hands. Dust settles upon the old boards, and the muted light from the small window grows thinner. Below the rafters, London murmurs through wet streets, distant wheels, and the faint closing of doors. You can still smell coal smoke in the chimney and old timber in the walls. The connected rooms lie quiet beyond the passage. Polly is somewhere near the children. Diggory is near the rings. Andrew's study waits below with its papers, string, and metal. The house remains narrow and still. The roof holds the darkness gently. A final carriage passes below, softened by rain. The children's footsteps fade into the adjoining rooms. Dust rests where they have walked. The little window grows pale. London breathes beneath the rafters, and the old timber keeps the warmth of the day. The rings are quiet. The pools are waiting. You stand between the familiar house and the silence beyond it, while the night gathers slowly around both worlds. Andrew's study lies beyond the narrow passage, where rain-darkened windows admit only a grey reflection of London. Brass instruments crowd the shelves. Glass jars stand beneath a veil of dust, and papers lean in uncertain towers beside the fireplace. Uncle Andrew remains near his desk, tall and thin in the lamplight, while the coloured rings rest upon a square of black velvet. You stand among the crowded furniture, close enough to smell old wood, cold ashes, and the faint metallic sharpness rising from the rings. Their surfaces are polished, yet each seems to hold a little warmth beneath the gold and green. Gaslight trembles across the glass, making the study appear deeper than it is, with corners retreating behind cabinets and bookcases. Outside, London continues in softened fragments, a wheel passing over wet stones, a distant voice, the faint closing of a door. Inside, the air remains still. Dust has settled upon the brass scales, the bottles, and the dark cover of a book whose title has almost entirely faded. Andrew tells you that his godmother, Mrs. Lefay, preserved knowledge of occult matters, and entrusted him with certain principles before her death. He speaks of the inheritance as though it were a scientific principle, carefully guarded yet capable of proof. The yellow rings, he explains, will carry a person from Earth into the wood between the worlds. The green rings will bring that person back from the wood to another world. He names the colors again, yellow for going, green for returning, and keeps one long finger raised beside each pair. The study grows quiet around his explanation, though rain continues behind the walls. A thin line of moisture shines upon the window pane, catching the lamp's yellow light. Beneath your feet, the floorboards are worn smooth where Andrew has walked for years. The velvet cloth absorbs the light, leaving the rings bright against its darkness. Their warmth is slight, almost imagined, like the heat remaining in a stone after sunset. Near the hearth, a brass sphere reflects the room in a warped miniature, while dust drifts through the beam above it. London seems close, yet the study has begun to feel separated from the city by more than glass. Andrew says that Mrs. Lefay had learned from older sources, and that fragments of this knowledge had passed through several hands before reaching him. His voice becomes solemn when he speaks her name, although his eyes remain fixed upon the rings. He claims that the principals have waited for a mind sufficiently disciplined to examine them, as though the children before him were merely instruments in an unfinished investigation. The room carries the dry odor of paper, dust, and old brass warmed by the lamp. A glass vessel near the wall contains cloudy liquid, and a thin skin has formed across its surface. Shadows lie beneath the desk, where loose wires and folded cloth have gathered. The rings give off no light of their own, yet the yellow pair seems brighter whenever Andrew moves his hand above them. The green pair remains darker, with a moss-like color beneath the polished surface. You hear the minute ticking of a clock, the muted hiss of gas, and rain slipping along the outside ledge. Andrew refuses to touch the rings himself. He says that he understands their effect too well to expose his own body to them, and that a true investigator must preserve his position as observer. His explanation sounds measured, yet the arrangement before you reveals another truth. The yellow rings are placed nearest Polly. The green rings lie farther away, beyond the reach of her smaller hands. Andrew has prepared the experiment, but he has not prepared the children for what it will do. Brass catches the lamplight in narrow edges across the desk, while dust softens every other surface. A glass shade above the flame has grown warm, and the air beneath it wavers almost imperceptibly. Polly stands beside the table with her coat, still damp from the street. You remain near the door, watching Andrew with a mixture of suspicion and impatience. The yellow ring waits upon the velvet, quiet and golden, giving off a faint warmth that reaches the skin before it is touched. Andrew speaks of investigation, observation, and the enlargement of human knowledge. He does not say that Polly has agreed to become part of the experiment because she has not been told what the ring will do. He places the yellow ring where her hand can reach it and describes the action as harmless, almost trivial. Then, with a mild movement of his fingers and a voice carefully stripped of urgency, he directs Polly to touch it. The moment changes without noise. London's rooms vanish from around Polly, leaving the desk, the lamp, and the shelves empty of her presence. One instant she is beside the velvet cloth. The next, only a small disturbance remains in the air above it. The yellow ring stays upon the desk, though its warmth seems stronger now. You stand frozen, while Andrew watches with an expression that approaches satisfaction. The space where Polly stood contains only the faintest movement of air. A thread of dust rises and turns in the lamplight, then settles against the dark wood. Beyond the window, rain marks the glass with thin, shining lines. The room seems to have expanded, though the furniture has not moved. A chair stands beside the desk with its cushion slightly compressed, and Polly's damp sleeve has left a small mark upon its arm. The silence is no longer ordinary indoor quiet. It presses gently against the walls, as if a doorway has opened somewhere unseen. You turn upon Andrew and demand to know where Polly has gone. He answers that she has gone precisely where the experiment was designed to send her. He admits that the action was deliberate, not accidental, and presents Polly's disappearance as a successful result. His calmness makes the truth more terrible. The yellow rings are not toys, and the wood between the worlds is not a room hidden behind the study. The brass instruments remain arranged in careful rows, untouched by the disturbance. Glass jars tremble faintly as the house settles, and dust gathers on the rim of an empty bowl. Andrew's face is pale beneath the lamp, but his hands stay folded against his waist. The yellow ring has lost some of its warmth, while the green pear remains cool and dark. Rain continues over London, indifferent and distant, separating the vanished child from the room by an unseen distance. You know that Polly must be rescued, although you do not understand the place to which she has gone. You accuse Andrew of cowardice, and he answers that the accusation is unfair. He says he cannot touch the rings himself because their effect may be dangerous, but you are young, healthy, and already involved. The language of science returns to his speech, disguising the fact that he is sending a child into an unknown world. The study's air feels close around your face, carrying the smell of dust and coal smoke from the passage. A brass clock gives one subdued click as its mechanism advances. In the glass of a cabinet, Andrew's reflection appears beside the empty space where Polly had been. The yellow ring waits like a small circle of captured daylight. Around it, the velvet shows a shallow impression from Polly's fingers, though no hand remains nearby. London's distant noises pass through the walls and fade. Andrew tells you to use the yellow ring and follow Polly. He explains that it will carry you to the wood between the worlds, where the pools provide routes onward. To return, you must find the green ring and touch it before entering a pool. Andrew speaks of separate worlds as though discussing rooms in a house, although he has never entered any of them. He remains in London while the children cross between worlds, protected by his refusal to participate. The desk has become the center of the room, with its brass edges, scratched surface, and scattered papers. A glass tube catches a line of lamplight and holds it like a pale thread. Dust lies upon the yellow ring, but the gold beneath remains clear. Faint warmth rises again when you lean close, brushing your knuckles through the air above it. Behind you, the study door stands open towards the dark passage, where the familiar house waits with its narrow stairs and sleeping rooms. You touch the yellow ring. Warmth reaches through your finger at once, and the study disappears without a sound. There is no falling sensation, no violent motion, and no darkness like the darkness beneath the ground. Instead, the rooms of London are simply absent, as though they have been removed from the world. You find yourself standing upon soft moss beneath trees that do not move, beside a pool of still green water. The moss yields beneath your shoes with a gentle, springy softness, cool on the soles and damp at the edges. Above you, the trees stand close together, their leaves green and quiet, without wind passing through them. Water lies in the pool like polished green glass, reflecting trunks and branches with perfect steadiness. No bird calls from the branches. No insect stirs among the moss. The silence is deeper than ordinary woodland quiet, extending in every direction without echo or interruption. Polly waits beside the pool. She is safe, though frightened, and her face shows the strain of crossing from the study alone. She tells you that the yellow ring carried her here almost immediately. Around you, the wood between the worlds appears peaceful, but its peace is not that of an earthly forest. The trees do not grow towards sunlight, and the pools do not gather rain. Each rests at a separate gateway, leading away towards another world. The air has no strong scent of leaves or soil. It is clean, mild, and strangely complete, as though the wood contains the idea of a summer afternoon rather than any particular season. Moss spreads in soft cushions over the ground, interrupted by roots that rise like quiet ridges. The green water beneath the unmoving trees reflects no sky, that you can clearly recognize. Light rests everywhere without seeming to come from a visible sun, and the whole place is held within a calm, suspended brightness. You tell Polly that Andrew sent you after her without softening the truth that he knew the ring's purpose. She is angry with both of you, and you accept her anger because she was brought here without being told what would happen. You explain that the green rings are for returning, while the yellow rings carry travelers from Earth into the wood. Together, you examine the velvet-like colors of the rings upon your fingers. A faint warmth remains along the skin where the yellow ring was touched. The green ring feels different, cooler and heavier, carrying the smooth chill of a pebble lifted from deep water. Polly's sleeve brushes against the moss, leaving a darkened patch that slowly fades. The pool beside you remains perfectly still, with no ripple from your voices and no disturbance beneath its surface. Around the trees, the silence gathers softly, without menace and without any ordinary measure of distance. You notice that every pool appears similar, yet each seems to possess a different depth of color. Some are pale as green glass, others dark as shaded leaves, and one nearby holds a faint brightness beneath its surface. You understand that the pools are gateways to separate worlds. The wood is a place between worlds, not a normal forest on Earth, and the yellow and green rings are the means by which you can cross its quiet center. A narrow space opens between the trees, showing several pools arranged upon the moss. Their edges are smooth, with no mud, stones, or reeds surrounding them. The water does not reflect you and Polly exactly. It gives back your shapes with a slight, dreamlike softness. A few leaves hang above the nearest pool, but none falls. The air rests upon your face like warm, motionless breath, and the ground feels firm enough to stand upon while remaining almost weightless beneath your feet. Andrew remains in London, beside his brass instruments and glass jars, waiting for evidence. He has sent the children across the threshold while calling the act scientific investigation. His supposed inheritance has become an excuse for irresponsibility, and Mrs. Leffay's knowledge has been placed in the hands of a man more interested in discovery than care. Yet you now possess the rings, and the wood lies open around you. The study is far away, though you can still remember its dusty shelves and the low hiss of gas. Polly carries the memory of the narrow London passage, the damp street, and Andrew's thin voice explaining what he refused to experience himself. Those familiar details seem strangely small beside the green pools. You stand together beneath the unmoving trees, while soft moss presses around your shoes and the air remains warm against your hands. You choose a neighboring pool. You do not know what waits beyond it, but the arrangement of the gateways suggests that each leads to a different world. Polly hesitates, holding her ring close while you prepare to touch the yellow ring again. The first journey has shown you the path between places. The next will carry you beyond the wood, towards the beginning of a world that has not yet entered any map of Earth. Light gathers upon the selected pool, though nothing in the wood has moved. Its surface remains flat and green, but beneath it a dim color begins to form, like dawn seen through deep water. Your reflections stretch slightly, then become still again. Moss cools beneath your shoes, while the quiet presses around your shoulders. Somewhere beyond the pool, a new air is waiting, carrying sounds, and whether not yet present in the wood. You and Polly touch your rings and step into the pool together. The water closes around your ankles without wetting them, and the gateway receives you with the same silent ease that brought you from London. Behind you, the wood between the worlds remains beneath its unmoving trees. Ahead, another world begins to take shape. The rings have formed an immediate connection between Edwardian London and Narnia's earliest age, while Uncle Andrew stays behind amid the brass, glass, and dust. The crossing has no thunder and no flash. Green light passes over you, followed by a warmth that seems to come from the water itself. The moss, the trees, and the neighboring pools recede without motion, like images fading from a polished surface. You keep Polly's hand in yours, and the yellow and green rings remain bright against your fingers. The silence changes gradually, making room for a deeper breath, a distant tremor, and the first uncertain sound of another world. The first uncertain sound belongs to no living creature that either child can name. It is a low vibration beneath the ground, so faint that it might be the settling of stone or the distant pulse of water beneath the roots. Polly's fingers tighten around Diggory's hand, and both children remain still until the green brightness thins into a colorless haze. You are standing on a broad pavement beneath a cloudless sky, where the air has lost its warmth and carries a dry, mineral chill. Nothing moves beside you, yet the silence seems newly occupied by empty streets, open doorways, and roofs leaning beneath the weight of their own neglect. The change is complete before the children understand that it has happened. The wood between the worlds has vanished, and in its place stands a city abandoned not yesterday, but at the end of an age. Great buildings rise on either side of the street, their walls cracked and weathered, their windows dark beneath carved stone lintels. A dry chill passes across your face, unlike the mild green air beneath the trees. Dust lies in the joints between the paving stones, and a fine powder gathers along the edges of fallen steps. The light is pale and hard, giving every broken surface a quiet sharpness. Diggory looks first at Polly, then at his own hands, as though their familiar shape might confirm that they are still in London. Polly is pale, but she does not cry out. The yellow and green rings remain upon their fingers, small and shining against the dead colors of Charn. The city stretches away beneath a sky too large for it, and the stillness is not the drowsy stillness of the wood. Here, the silence feels finished. You hear no bird, no leaf, no cartwheel, and no voice hidden behind the shuttered windows. For a while, neither child speaks. The street before them is wide enough for processions, and at its far end, a flight of steps climbs towards a building whose columns have been broken in two. Statues stand along the pavement, but their faces have been worn away, leaving only the calm, blank forms of people who once possessed names. Diggory says that this must be Charn, because the pool brought them here, and because the city cannot belong to any place they have known. Polly answers that it is an unpleasant place, and that they ought to return before anything notices them. The sun, if it is the sun, hangs low over the ruined roofs, though no shadow moves as the light changes. It touches the dust with a faint copper color and rests upon a fallen wall where dry weeds have grown among the stones. The warmth is weak, and the air remains cold. Diggory walks a few paces towards the broken building, carrying the stubborn curiosity that has guided him from the garden wall and through the rings. Polly follows because she will not remain alone, though each step seems to take them farther from the green pool concealed somewhere beyond the city. A long avenue opens before you, paved with slabs split by frost or age. Along its edges, empty fountains hold only dust, while delicate channels once meant for water lead towards gardens now buried beneath grey soil. The distant light lies in thin strips upon the pavement. At the center of Charn, the children find a square surrounded by tall houses, many fallen inward. In the middle stands a platform of black stone, and upon it rests a metal bell beneath a narrow canopy. The bell is large enough to require 2 hands around its clapper, and words have been engraved along its rim. Polly reads none of the writing, but Diggory bends close and tries to make sense of the letters. Some resemble marks from an old book, while others are so unfamiliar that they seem less like language than scratches left by a tool. The inscription promises that whoever strikes the bell will awaken the person for whom the world was made. Dust has settled inside the letters, softening their edges beneath your fingertips. The bell's metal is cold, but not with the wet cold of English weather. It has the dry, sealed cold of a cellar unopened for centuries. A faint smell of stone rises around the platform. Polly tells Diggory not to touch it. Nothing on Charn looks as though it has been placed there for kindness, she says, and the inscription is plainly meant to tempt someone who thinks himself clever. Diggory listens, yet his eyes remain upon the bell. The accident that brought them to the wood began with Aunt Letty's garden, Uncle Andrew's rings, and a secret understood only in fragments. Now the journey has become a chain of choices, and Diggory's choices are giving it direction. A narrow, windless street extends behind the square, where curtains hang in windows that no longer possess glass. You pass beneath an archway carved with winged shapes, and the hollow spaces between the stones hold a darkness deeper than the evening around them. Diggory says that the person named in the inscription may know what happened to Charn. Polly replies that finding out is not worth the risk, because the dead city has already told them enough. Their voices sound very small beneath the empty buildings. They turn away from the bell and climb the steps of the great building. At the top, bronze doors stand open, their surfaces green with age. Beyond them lies a hall filled with columns, broken mosaics, and fragments of colored glass that catch the pale light without making it warmer. Inside, the air is even drier. You stand among enormous pillars whose capitals are shaped like folded leaves, and every sound returns slowly from the walls. The floor is covered with pale dust, except where a broad path has been cleared by something that passed long ago. There are no footprints. Diggory notices that at once, and Polly notices it after him. The absence matters because a city so great should have contained countless people, yet Charn offers no sign that anyone has crossed the dust since the last moment of its life. At the end of the hall, a stairway rises towards a chamber beneath a dome. Along the stair stand figures of kings and queens, each carved in a different posture. Some hold swords, some books, and some small children whose faces have been carefully erased. Their stone garments seem almost soft beneath the thin layer of dust. The carved folds catch the light in quiet bands, while the chamber above remains shadowed and cool. You hear the gentle scrape of your own clothing and Polly's faint breathing beside you. Diggory wonders whether the people of Charn were destroyed by war, disease, or some power that neither child can imagine. Polly says that perhaps they destroyed themselves, and her suggestion settles between them with the weight of an object placed upon a table. The chamber beneath the dome contains a row of tall statues seated upon thrones. They are dressed in crowns, cloaks, and armor, and each face bears an expression unlike the calm faces along the streets. These faces are proud, watchful, and severe. A thin layer of grit covers the thrones, but the eyes of the statues remain clear. Light from the broken dome rests in them like dull glass, and the dry cold of Charn gathers most strongly around the furthest figure. Diggory moves from statue to statue, reading names where the letters have survived. Polly remains near the entrance, keeping one hand closed around the green ring. The names form a history of rulers, victories, marriages, betrayals, and punishments, though much of their meaning has been lost. The final statue is not seated like the others. It stands upright beside an empty throne, with one hand raised and the other resting upon a sword. Her face is beautiful, proud, and terrible, and the words beneath her feet identify her as Jadis, Queen of Charn. Her stone robe falls in hard, narrow lines, and the raised hand casts a long shadow over the floor. Fine dust has gathered in the hollows of the carving, yet the features remain almost untouched, as if the air itself had avoided them. Polly says that they have seen enough. Diggory agrees in words, but he continues reading the inscription beneath Jadis. It speaks of the last days of Charn, when two powers struggled for the throne and one refused surrender. A dry quiet surrounds you, broken only by a faint ticking from somewhere within the dome. The sound may come from cooling metal or shifting stone, yet it resembles a clock whose hands have stopped, while its mechanism continues beneath the casing. The inscription does not name the opposing power. It says only that Jadis spoke the deplorable word, and that every living thing in Charn was destroyed, except the queen herself. The final line declares that she waited for the end of the world. Diggory reads the words twice. Polly asks him what they mean, and he says that the deplorable word must be some terrible spell. Neither child yet understands that the peaceful beginning in the wood has carried them into the aftermath of violence beyond any earthly scale. The chamber has no ordinary draught, though the dome is open to the sky. You feel cold gather around your ankles and rise slowly through the fabric of your clothes. The stone beneath your shoes seems to hold a memory of heat, now reduced to a faint and lifeless trace. Diggory looks back towards the entrance. He says that Jaddies cannot still be alive because the city has been empty for so long that even the dust seems ancient. Polly answers that they should not test the thought and begins descending the stairs. At the foot of the staircase, Diggory stops. The Queen's raised hand remains visible above him, and the idea of a person waiting alone at the end of a ruined world has taken hold of his mind. He says that perhaps the bell was made to wake her. Cold light falls across the broken mosaics, revealing patterns of ships, gardens, stars, and crowned figures. Some tiles are blue as deep water, while others have faded to the color of old bone. Dust fills the spaces between them, leaving the scenes incomplete. Polly turns on him with sudden anger and tells him that waking a queen who destroyed her world is precisely what the inscription warned them not to do. Diggory admits that she may be right, but says they cannot leave without learning more. The bell waits outside in the square. Its dark metal shows no mark of rust, and the engraved promise remains clear beneath the thin coat of dust. Diggory walks towards it, while Polly follows with the expression of someone accompanying a friend into foolishness. The square is quieter than before, though nothing visible has changed. You stand beneath the pale sky, with the ruined city around you, and the bell's canopy makes a small island of shadow upon the black platform. Polly reminds Diggory that the wood between the worlds is still close, and that the yellow ring can carry them back whenever they choose. Diggory says that this is why they are safe, though his certainty has begun to sound like an argument he is making against himself. He reaches towards the clapper. Polly catches his sleeve and pulls him back. For a moment they remain locked together beside the bell, two human children surrounded by a world that has outlived every witness to its final day. The metal beneath your palm feels smoother than the surrounding stone, polished by hands absent for generations. No warmth comes from it, and no vibration answers your touch. Beyond the square, the empty houses appear to wait without expectation. Diggory pulls free and strikes the bell. The sound is not loud at first. It begins as a clear note, almost delicate, traveling through the square and into the buildings. Then it deepens, becoming broad and immense, until the stones beneath your feet tremble and pale dust lifts in slow clouds around the platform. The note rolls through Charn like a command remembered by the ruins. It passes beneath doorways, along empty avenues, and through halls where the statues have stood untouched. Polly covers her ears, but the sound seems to enter through the ground as much as through the air. The bell's vibration remains in your bones after the ringing has ended. Dust drifts down from the canopy in tiny, weightless threads, and the dead city seems to draw one long breath. Somewhere inside the great building, a door closes. A woman's voice says that she has been waiting. Polly steps backwards, and Diggory turns towards the building. The voice comes again, nearer now, although no figure has appeared in the square. It tells them that they have done well to come and asks whether they are from Earth or another world. The air has become still in a different manner, as though even the dust has paused between its movements. You feel the cold sharpen against your face, while the Queen's voice remains strangely calm beneath the empty sky. Jaddies emerges from the bronze doors. She is taller than any woman the children have known, and her garments are magnificent despite the dust upon them. A crown rests upon her head, and her expression shows neither grief nor surprise at the destruction around her. Diggory sees at once that the statue had not exaggerated her beauty, Her face is strong and commanding, her eyes bright beneath dark brows, and her whole appearance carries the confidence of someone accustomed to obedience. The queen walks towards them without hurrying. Her footsteps make almost no sound, though the square is so silent that each movement seems to possess a separate shape. Polly reaches for Diggory's hand, and this time he does not resist. Jadis asks who has summoned her. Diggory gives his name and says that they came through a pool from another place. Polly adds that they did not understand what the bell would do, though Diggory knows this is not entirely true. Around you, Charn remains motionless beneath the hard light. The empty fountains, broken statues, and dust-covered avenues form a silent court for the queen. No shadow of another person moves behind her, and no animal calls from the ruined gardens. Jadis asks whether the world from which they came is still alive. Diggory says that it is, and she asks whether it has many people, cities, and power. He answers that it has all of these, though he does not know why he tells her. Polly watches the queen carefully and says nothing. Jadis listens to Diggory's answers with the concentration of a ruler measuring a distant territory. Her gaze passes over the rings, and at once she understands that they are the means by which the children entered Charn. A faint warmth remains upon the metal rings, though the city air is cold. You feel the smooth circle against your skin, and beneath it, the steady beat of your pulse. The yellow ring seems almost ordinary, while the green ring carries the quiet promise of return. Jadis asks whether the rings were made by a magician. Diggory says that an adult in London made them, and her expression changes when he mentions his uncle. She says that the maker must possess knowledge, but not wisdom. The queen tells them that Charn was once the greatest city in the universe. Its people mastered science, armies, and hidden powers of the mind, yet she speaks of these things without admiration. Greatness, she says, is useful only when it serves the will of the strongest. The shadows of the broken buildings lie long across the square, though the sun has not visibly moved. You stand beside Polly beneath the bell, listening to the history of Charn, while the dry chill presses through your sleeves. Jadis explains that her sister opposed her claim to the throne. Their war continued until every army had been defeated, every city exhausted, and every hope of victory reduced to a final act. Her sister spoke first, she says, but Jadis alone possessed the courage to speak the deplorable word. Polly asks what the word did. Jadis answers that it ended all life. The statement is given plainly, like a report of weather observed from a high tower. Every creature disappeared at once, she says, leaving only herself alive beneath the sun. No wind touches the queen's robes. The folds remain fixed against her body, and the air around her seems sealed. Dust rests on the steps behind her, while a single pale thread of light passes across the ground and vanishes beneath the broken fountain. Diggory asks why she did not die with everyone else. Jadis says that she had prepared herself, and that a queen must preserve what is valuable when the world has become unworthy. She then looks past the children towards the ring on Diggory's finger. Polly says they are leaving. She pulls Diggory towards the edge of the square, but Jadis does not try to stop them. Instead, she tells Diggory that a world containing children may contain better things than Charn, and that she would like to see it. The street behind you remains open, though the route towards the pool is no longer clear. Broken avenues divide around fallen buildings, and the pale light makes each possible direction appear equally distant. Polly's hand is warm, while the ring beneath your finger feels cold. Diggory understands that Jadis has no ring of her own and cannot follow unless they take her. He says that they came alone and will return alone. The queen smiles slightly, as though a child has announced a rule that adults are free to ignore. She moves more quickly than they expect. One hand closes around Diggory's shoulder, while the other catches Polly by the arm. The children struggle, but Jadis is far stronger than she looks, and the dead city offers no help. The dry chill of Charn presses around your body as the queen draws you close. Her clothing smells faintly of dust and cold metal, and beneath the fragrance of old perfume lies the odor of a room sealed for a very long time. Jadis tells Diggory to use the yellow ring. Polly says that he must not obey her, but Diggory already knows that the ring is the only path away. He reaches for Polly, and the three of them vanish from the square. Green light folds around them. The ruined city collapses into distance without sound, and the Queen's grip remains firm until the moment the wood receives them. Then the trees rise around the children and Jadis like a wall of living color. Warm green air settles over your face with such gentleness that the cold of Charn seems imagined. The pools lie beneath the trees, bright and dark among the roots, while the leaves hang almost motionless above their surfaces. The wood between the worlds is unchanged. Contains many pools, each surrounded by trees, and each holding a different distant light beneath the quiet green shade. The place remains peaceful, drowsy, and suspended, as if time has forgotten to move there. Jadis looks around with immediate dislike. She says that the wood is weak, empty, and without purpose, because there are no palaces, armies, or subjects beneath its trees. Diggory feels the insult as a kind of relief, since her attention is no longer fixed upon London. The children have learned that the pools are gateways, though they have not yet understood the cost of standing among them. The first pools they visited seemed harmless, and the wood had encouraged them to rest before choosing another world. Soft brightness trembles beneath the water, although no breeze crosses the pools. You kneel beside one and see a distant sky reflected below the surface, blue in one pool, amber in another, and silver-grey in a third. Before Charn, Diggory and Polly travelled from pool to pool without entering the worlds beneath them. They touched the cool water, watched unfamiliar lights shift below, and wondered whether each place held people, animals, cities, or only wilderness. Polly had explained that the yellow ring brought her to the wood when she first tried it. She had found herself beneath the trees, with no sound of London remaining and no visible movement among the leaves. Diggory had followed her using the second ring. The soil is soft beneath your knees, and the moss gives slightly when you place a hand upon it. No ordinary wind moves through the wood, no birdsong rises from the branches, and no visible creature crosses the spaces between the pools. Diggory tests the rings once more, first touching the yellow ring and then the green. The movement is simple enough to seem almost foolish, yet the result is certain. One ring carries them away from the wood, while the other brings them back. Each pool leads to a different world. The children do not need a map, a machine, or a carefully measured route. They need only a small patch of forest, a circle of water, and the decision to place a ring upon the skin. A cool gleam rests on the surface nearest you, and the water closes over your fingers without resistance. Beneath the pool, distant light gathers in slow layers, showing a horizon that might belong to another planet or to a dream of Earth. For a time, Diggory and Polly sit beneath the trees. They speak quietly about London, Aunt Letty, Uncle Andrew, and the garden wall. Their thoughts drift from one subject to another, becoming softer as the wood's stillness surrounds them. The soft heaviness of sleep settles beneath the branches. Polly's head rests against the trunk of a tree, and Diggory finds his own eyes closing despite the worry that carried him through Charn. The green shade makes every intention feel less urgent. You lie upon the moss where the roots make a shallow hollow, and the ground seems warm through your clothes. The air remains still around you, carrying no scent except damp earth, green leaves, and the faint mineral freshness of the pools. Diggory nearly forgets why they came. He remembers wanting to return to London, yet the memory has become thin, like writing seen through water. The wood makes distant worlds seem less real than the shade beneath the trees. Polly says that she could sleep for 100 years. Diggory answers that perhaps they already have, because the wood contains no ordinary measure of time. He knows they must leave, but cannot immediately recall what danger waits beyond the green shade. Leaves hang above you in overlapping layers, each marked by a different softness of green. Light filters through them without flicker, and the pools remain bright at their centers, like quiet windows opening downwards. Diggory looks at the rings, and then at Polly. The sight of the yellow ring restores some part of his purpose, reminding him that they belong to a world where people grow old, clocks continue, and doors are opened by hands. He insists that they investigate another world before returning home. Polly says that Charn has already been sufficient investigation, but Diggory replies that they cannot leave Jaddies in the wood. His decision is no longer accidental. It is an attempt to repair what he has helped cause. The children stand among the pools while the trees remain almost perfectly still. You feel no wind against your clothes, and no insect brushes your skin, yet the wood is not empty. Its quiet life seems to exist below the threshold of sight. Polly chooses a pool that appears darker than the others. Diggory chooses one reflecting a sky of soft gold. They examine several circles of water, but none offers an obvious sign of London, and none seems to promise a safe landing. A pool beside you catches the distant light and holds it beneath the surface, where it shines without rippling. The water is cool enough to numb your fingertips, and the surrounding moss gives off a mild, green scent. At last, Diggory says that they must go to the pool from which they came. Polly agrees, provided Jaddies remains behind. Yet Jaddies is watching them from beneath another tree, and her expression shows that she has understood their plan. The Queen strides towards them. The children retreat towards the nearest water, but there is no distance in the wood that can conceal them. The pools are close together, and the trees offer no path by which one person can be separated from another. Jaddies says that she will not remain in a place without servants. She asks Diggory to take her to the world of living people, and when he refuses, she speaks of the power she could offer him in return. The green air seems warmer around the children, while a faint golden reflection rests upon Jaddies' face. You hear the delicate sound of water against the bank, though no hand or breeze disturbs it. Diggory tells Polly to use the green ring. Polly reaches for him, but Jaddies catches Diggory first. The Queen's hand is cold and strong, and the next moment the wood falls away beneath a rush of green light. They return to London with Jaddies between them, and the familiar world receives the Queen as though it has been waiting for her arrival. The garden is quiet, the afternoon grey, and the ordinary houses beyond the wall appear suddenly fragile. The city's damp air touches your face after the dry chill of Charn. You smell soil, brick, and distant coal smoke, while the garden leaves stir faintly in a breeze impossible beneath the trees of the wood. Jaddies looks at London and laughs softly. She sees the narrow garden, the dirty pavement, and the brick walls, yet also a world filled with people, machinery, and opportunities. Diggory understands that the peaceful wood was never meant to be a home. It is a crossroads, a place between places, where worlds may be entered and abandoned with the movement of a hand. The children remain human visitors throughout their travels, carrying their fears, loyalties, and mistakes from one reality into the next. The garden's ordinary colors appear brighter after the wood, though the sky remains overcast. You stand beside the damp flower beds and feel the uneven earth beneath your shoes, with London returning beyond the wall in distant, familiar layers. Diggory's journey began by accident, with rings made in secret and a friend who had been sent away. It has become increasingly shaped by his decisions, especially the decision to strike the bell and bring Jaddies from Charn. Polly understands this before he does. She is angry with him, but she does not abandon him, because the rings have made their lives inseparable from one another's choices. Together, they look towards the house where Uncle Andrew is waiting. Behind their eyes, the wood remains green and still. Many pools rest beneath its trees, each leading to a different world, and the calm of that place seems almost cruel beside the dead silence of Charn. No breeze moves through the remembered leaves, and no bird breaks the quiet in the imagined branches. You can still feel cool water closing over your hands, while distant light lies beneath the pools like a promise that does not explain itself. The children have seen how a simple physical landscape can make many worlds accessible. A ring, a pool, and a few steps beneath the trees are enough to connect London with a city from legend, and the path between them is as quiet as sleep. The wood is an image of stillness and suspended time, but its stillness is not safety. It permits rest, forgetfulness, and passage, while every pool conceals a history that may be gentle, dangerous, or impossibly old. You remain for a moment at the edge of the garden, with London's damp breath moving around you and the memory of warm green air held quietly beneath your thoughts. Somewhere beyond sight, the wood waits without wind, birdsong, or visible movement. Diggory closes his hand around the yellow ring. Polly stands beside him, and the Queen watches the house with the patience of someone who has already begun to imagine it as her own. The peaceful beginning has ended, though the green trees remain behind them. Charn's violent history now travels with the children into the ordinary world. Its queen has crossed the threshold, and the road from London to a world of myth has opened through a place that appears to contain nothing more than trees, pools, and sleep. The garden darkens gradually beneath the clouded sky. You hear a distant carriage pass, the soft scrape of a branch against brick, and the faint ticking of a clock beyond the closed windows. Diggory and Polly move towards the house, carrying the rings and the knowledge of Charn. Behind them, the wood between the worlds remains peaceful, drowsy, and silent, with its many pools shining beneath the trees. One pool waits for each world, and each world waits beyond its own surface. The children cannot see distant cities, forests, deserts, or skies from London, yet the roots exist, folded into a landscape that seems to have no beginning and no end. The last warmth of the afternoon rests upon the garden wall. You feel it fade beneath the cool air, while the damp earth gives back a quiet scent, and the house ahead holds the first sounds of another decision. Diggory has not yet understood what the Queen will bring, or what greater change will follow from their movements between the pools. For now, he knows only that the rings work, that Charn is real, and that the wood has allowed the worlds to touch. The children pass through the doorway. The garden falls behind them, and the remembered green air becomes softer, more distant, and almost dreamlike. Yet beneath the trees, the pools remain, reflecting distant light in silence, while the worlds beyond them wait. Now you stand with Diggory and Polly upon a broad pavement of ash-colored stone, beneath a sky that contains neither birds nor clouds nor weather. The air is still, dry, and strangely weightless, without the mild movement that belongs to any living country. Around you, the empty city stretches in every direction, arranged with such immense order that its silence seems deliberate. Straight avenues run between tall buildings, formal squares open beneath broken towers, and distant terraces rise in measured steps towards a palace. Nothing grows between the stones. No grass softens the edges, and no vine climbs the walls. The city is ruined, but it has not become wild. Its destruction remains architectural, severe, and complete. Diggory looks along the empty streets, and Polly walks close beside him, though neither child speaks for some time. You move with them beneath the dead sky, hearing only the faint brushing of their clothes and the careful placement of their shoes upon the stone. There are no footsteps approaching from a side street, no voice behind a shutter, and no fluttering creature disturbed by your passage. Charn is an abandoned world, and its abandonment is more unsettling because the city is vast enough to have held a multitude. The avenues are wide, the doorways high, and the public buildings larger than anything the children have known. Everywhere, the proportions suggest ceremony, government, and a powerful people who once moved through these spaces in ordered processions. Yet no living animals remain in Charn, and no living people wait behind the dark windows. The absence is not temporary. It fills the whole world. A pale radiance lies over the pavement, although no sun can be seen. It is not warm daylight, nor the soft brightness of evening, but a colourless illumination that seems to have been left behind after the light itself departed. The ash-coloured stone beneath your feet holds shallow cracks, and fine dust has settled into every line. When you lift one foot, the sound is dry and delicate, like a finger drawn across paper. The buildings around you have windows of black glass, many of them broken, though no shards glitter in the stillness. Their surfaces have been dulled by age, and their walls show no moss, soot, or rain marks. The sky above remains perfectly empty. No clouds gather over the towers, no wind carries dust along the roads, and no weather changes the expression of the place. Silence rests upon Charn like a heavy fabric. You follow the children through an avenue lined with statues, each figure carved in dark, polished stone. Some have fallen, but most still stand upon their pedestals, facing the road with formal expressions. A woman wears a crown shaped like flames, while an armed man holds a sword across his breast. Farther along, a child with solemn eyes sits upon a throne too large for him. Diggory stops to examine an inscription, but the letters have been worn until their meaning disappears beneath the dust. Polly studies the empty balconies above them and says that she does not like the place. Her words seem small against the surrounding architecture. They travel a short distance, touch the walls, and vanish. Diggory answers that the city must once have been full of people. You can hear uncertainty entering his voice, because the evidence of former life is everywhere, while life itself has entirely gone. The pavement rises towards a monumental staircase, and the children begin to climb. Dust has gathered on the palace steps in soft grey ridges, lying undisturbed, except where the children place their feet. The stairway is broad enough for several lines of soldiers, though no soldier has crossed it for countless years. Broken columns lean beside the entrance, and fragments of carved metal lie among the dust. You feel the dryness in your throat as the palace draws nearer, and the silence seems to deepen around its doors. Nothing moves within the entrance. There is no echo from distant rooms, no settling timber, and no sound of air passing through the corridors. The palace waits beneath the dead sky with the patience of something that has forgotten time. Inside, the children discover that the palace is larger than the city streets had suggested. You pass through long corridors holding stale, airless darkness, where the walls rise above you like cliffs. The floors are made of coloured stone, but their patterns have faded beneath a coating of dust. Doors stand open on either side, revealing chambers filled with broken furniture, empty fountains, and motionless curtains. Diggory and Polly move carefully through the darkness, their hands occasionally touching the walls for guidance. At intervals, a high opening admits the same lifeless light seen outside. It falls in narrow bars across the floor, showing dust floating without any visible current. The palace contains no living animals, no servants, and no guards. Its emptiness confirms the terrible stillness of the city beyond. At last, the corridor opens into a hall of immense height, and rows of silent royal figures stand upon either side. You look from one statue to the next as Diggory and Polly advance between them. Former rulers of Charn gaze down from their thrones, their faces shaped with the confidence of people who believed their names would endure. Some hold scepters, some wear armor, and others are dressed in elaborate robes covered with carved patterns. Their eyes are made of colored stones that catch the weak light, giving them the appearance of watching the children. Yet every figure is stone, and every face remains fixed. The statues continue deeper into the palace until they become indistinct in the darkness. It seems that the whole history of Charn has been gathered in this hall, preserved after the people themselves disappeared. The air in the chamber is colder than outside, though it remains perfectly still. Dust lies along the edges of the thrones and forms little banks beneath the statues' feet. Your breathing becomes noticeable, not because it is loud, but because every other sound has been removed. Polly's sleeve brushes against a pillar, and the faint scrape travels through the hall with surprising clarity. Diggory's shoes make muted marks in the powder on the floor. Above you, the roof disappears into darkness, and somewhere beyond it, the palace seems to continue without limit. The smell is mineral and old, like a sealed cellar whose stones have remained untouched. No bird has entered through the high windows, and no insect disturbs the dust. Near the end of the hall, Diggory sees a bell standing upon a low table. It is not large, but its metal surface is dark and lustrous, as if polished by hands that vanished long ago. Beside it lies a small hammer. A plaque fixed to the table bears an inscription, and Diggory bends close to read it. The words invite the reader to strike the bell, while warning that the act may awaken something better left sleeping. Polly immediately tells him not to touch it. You hear the sharp unease in her voice, and you see her place one hand against his arm. Diggory hesitates, looking from the bell to the silent rulers. The palace seems to hold its breath around them, though the air remains stale and unmoving. The bell's metal catches a narrow strip of pale light. Its surface is marked with delicate figures of crowned heads, extinguished stars, and armies arranged beneath a darkened sun. The hammer lies beside it, covered in a thin coat of dust, except where its handle has been worn smooth. You stand close enough to see the inscription cut into the plaque, each letter deep and careful, as though the maker expected a curious hand to arrive centuries later. The darkness beyond the bell appears thicker than the darkness behind you. It gathers between the statues and fills the spaces beneath the distant roof. Polly's warning seems to remain in the air after she has spoken, while the metallic shape waits in complete stillness. Diggory tells Polly that the inscription could not have been placed there without a reason. He says the bell may reveal the history of Charn, and he believes that knowledge is worth the danger. Polly answers that the warning is itself knowledge enough. You watch the children stand beside the table, divided between caution and curiosity, while the silent rulers look on from their thrones. Diggory's hand moves towards the hammer, pauses, and then closes around its handle. Polly protests once more, but he has already lifted the hammer. The movement is small, almost ordinary, and yet the entire dead city seems to depend upon it. Diggory strikes the bell. The sound begins as a single metallic note, clear and narrow, rising through the hall before expanding into the corridors. It passes among the statues, enters the empty rooms, and reaches the palace steps beyond the doors. You feel the vibration in the stone beneath your feet, where it continues after the first sound has faded. Then the bell answers itself with a deeper resonance, as though the palace has become one enormous chamber of metal. The ringing travels through Charn, crossing the formal avenues and vacant squares. It moves beneath the dead sky, where no bird lifts from a roof and no cloud receives the sound. Diggory lowers the hammer, and Polly turns towards him with frightened disbelief. The bell continues to ring without another blow. Its metallic note rises, falls, and returns in long waves, becoming both distant and immediate. Dust slips from the palace ceiling and settles upon the royal statues. In the corridors, the airless darkness seems to tremble, though no breeze enters through the windows. You hear the ringing diminish at last, each echo becoming thinner until the final note hangs above the children like a thread. When it stops, the oppressive hush is more powerful than before. Polly grips Diggory's hand and whispers that something has happened. From far within the palace comes a faint sound, neither voice nor footstep, but the slow movement of something waking after an age of stillness. The children turn towards the deepest part of the hall. At first, the royal figures appear unchanged, and you can barely distinguish one statue from another in the dimness. Then a shape at the end of the row begins to move. A figure seated upon a high throne lifts its head, and dust falls from its shoulders in a soft veil. The face is not stone. It is pale, severe, and alive, with eyes that open upon the children as though they had been expected. Jadis rises from her enchanted stillness with extraordinary calm. She is taller than Polly and more imposing than Diggory, though her strength seems to belong to the whole body rather than to any single gesture. Her posture remains perfectly confident as she steps down from the throne. The Queen wears garments that have lost some of their colour, but none of their magnificence. Jewelled bands encircle her arms, and a crown rests upon her dark hair. Her expression contains neither confusion nor fear. You sense that she has awakened not into a strange world, but into a world she still considers her own. The dust on the steps parts beneath her feet, revealing polished stone below. Her movement is silent, and the silence makes her seem more powerful. Polly retreats behind Diggory, while Diggory faces the Queen with the helpless courage of a child who has already caused the danger. Jadis looks first at the bell, then at the children, and finally towards the empty hall. When Jadis speaks, her voice is low and composed, carrying through the palace without effort. She identifies herself as Jadis, the last Queen of Charn, and names the city as her city. The words are not offered as an introduction, because she assumes that the children already understand her authority. She asks whether the dead have returned, or whether some remnant of another world has entered her palace. Diggory explains that he and Polly came through a doorway, though he cannot describe the pools or the wood in a way she would understand. Jadis listens without interrupting. Her eyes remain fixed upon him, bright with an intelligence that has survived the ruin around her. You feel that the children have not found a helpless sleeper, but a ruler who has been waiting. The Queen walks past the bell and pauses before the nearest statue. It represents a broad-shouldered man with a crown above his carved brow. Jadis says that he was once her father, though his reign ended before the final struggle. She continues along the row, naming rulers whose faces remain severe beneath the dust. Every statue belongs to a former sovereign of Charn, and every sovereign belongs to a history the children cannot yet comprehend. The palace contains the memory of a civilization, but Jadis speaks of it as though it were a private household. You hear no tenderness in her account. There is only possession, certainty, and the controlled pride of someone who believes that the past remains answerable to her. Beyond the hall, stale darkness fills the long corridors, carrying the faint scent of metal and stone. Jadis's footsteps remain almost inaudible, while the children's movements sound clumsy beside hers. The walls are decorated with faded scenes of triumph, showing armies beneath banners and crowned figures raising their hands over conquered cities. Some painted faces have been scratched away, but the remaining colors still suggest red, gold, and deep blue. Dust covers the palace steps behind you, softening the marks left by Diggory and Polly. No sound comes from the city. The bell has stopped ringing, yet its note seems to remain within your bones, an afterimage of noise beneath the greater silence. Jadis leads the children towards a balcony overlooking the city. From there, Charn extends beneath the empty sky in a pattern of roads, towers, bridges, and public squares. The city is so vast that its outer edges disappear into the pale distance. Diggory asks where all the people have gone. Jadis answers that there are no people and that there are no animals either. Her reply is direct, without grief or hesitation. She says that every living thing in Charn ended when the final word was spoken. The world's silence, which had seemed like a mystery to the children, becomes evidence of a catastrophic end. You look over the deserted avenues and begin to understand that nothing has been merely abandoned. Charn has been emptied. The balcony stones are cold beneath your hands, and the balustrade is powdered with grey dust. Far below, statues stand at intersections where no citizens gather and no carts pass. Doors remain open in the buildings, but their interiors show only shadow. The dead sky has no sun to cast a direction, and the light seems equally present on every surface. A faint dryness touches your lips, while the palace air presses against your ears with almost physical weight. You can imagine the city as it once was, full of voices, wheels, animals, and ceremonial music, yet imagination cannot restore even one sound. The hush after the bell has become the defining texture of Charn. Jadis describes the final conflict as a struggle between herself and those who opposed her claim to absolute rule. She says that the people of Charn were divided, and that the division could not be healed by ordinary victory. Her enemies possessed armies, fortresses, and powerful forms of magic, but Jadis believed that such advantages would produce only a temporary peace. She wanted a final triumph that would leave no rival, no rebellion, and no possibility of resistance. The children listen as she explains that she chose a destructive power, knowing that its use would end more than the battle itself. She does not present the decision as madness. She presents it as the necessary price of absolute victory. The Queen's account moves slowly through the empty palace, and you hear confidence beneath every word. She says that the conflict continued until Charn could no longer bear the strain. The streets had filled with soldiers, the royal houses had turned against one another, and the ancient powers of the world had been drawn into the struggle. Jadis claims that she offered her enemies one final chance to surrender. When they refused, she used the power known as the deplorable word. The phrase seems to darken the air around you. It refers not merely to a weapon, but to an act whose meaning remains terrible even after all its victims have disappeared. Jadis says that the deplorable word destroyed every living thing in Charn except the person who spoke it. She claims that nothing living remained after the words were spoken, not in the armies, the cities, or the distant lands beyond the palace. Her own survival was not an accident. She had protected herself by enchantment, preserving her body in an enchanted stillness until the world became quiet. You understand that she chose to remain alone rather than accept defeat. The city ended, the people vanished, and the rulers became statues, but Jadis retained her life and her certainty. Her victory was absolute because nothing living remained to challenge it. The air outside the balcony feels motionless against your face. No wind crosses the city, although the height should have exposed you to some movement. The distant towers stand with their edges softened by dust, and the vacant streets resemble channels carved into a plain of grey stone. No cloud passes above the palace. No bird circles the highest roof. No weather gathers anywhere across Charn, and the world appears sealed beneath its dead sky. The Queen's voice has ceased, yet her explanation seems to occupy the spaces between the buildings. Even the children remain quiet. The silence is no longer merely empty, it has become a record of the deplorable word. Diggory asks whether Jadis regrets what she did. The Queen regards him with mild surprise, as though the question belongs to a smaller morality. She says that regret would imply the possibility of another choice, while she had faced a choice between losing everything and winning everything. She chose victory. In her view, the destruction of Charn was not a failure, because the enemy was destroyed along with the world. Jadis speaks of absolute victory as something clean and final. You can hear no tremor in her voice, no admission of sorrow, and no uncertainty about the consequences. The absence of remorse frightens Polly more deeply than the ruin itself. Jadis turns from the balcony and begins to descend towards the palace entrance. Diggory follows because he cannot think of any other course, and Polly follows because leaving him alone with the Queen would be more dangerous. You move among the statues once again, while Jadis passes them without looking back. Her extraordinary physical strength becomes clear when a fallen stone blocks the corridor. She lifts it with one hand and sets it aside as though it were broken furniture. The gesture is controlled, almost careless. Diggory stares, and Polly draws nearer to him. Jadis notices their fear and seems pleased, not with cruelty, but with the confidence of someone accustomed to being stronger than everyone around her. Beyond the corridor, the palace darkens into long galleries where stale, airless darkness hangs beneath the arches. The walls narrow, and your shoulder nearly brushes the carved stone as you hurry after the queen. Fine powder shifts beneath your feet, making a faint granular sound that seems strangely loud. Behind you, the Hall of Rulers recedes into shadow, and the metallic bell is no longer visible. You still remember its note, however, trembling through the stone and calling Jadis from her enchanted stillness. The palace steps lie somewhere ahead, covered in dust and waiting beneath the pale light. Around the children, the hush has returned, but it now feels like a pause before movement. Jadis tells the children that she must leave Charn, because the world has no nourishment and no future. She says that the city belongs to her, yet ownership of a tomb provides little advantage. When Diggory mentions the doorway through which they entered, her attention sharpens. She asks whether it leads to another country, another world, or a place where living things still grow. Diggory answers cautiously, and Polly warns him not to explain too much. Jadis ignores the warning and orders the children to take her to the gateway. Her authority is immediate. She does not ask for their agreement, because she has already decided that they will lead her away from the dead city. The palace entrance opens before you, and the ash-colored streets lie beyond it beneath the same blank sky. Dust has gathered on the broad steps, filling the carved channels between them. Jadis descends without hesitation, while Diggory and Polly follow more quickly. Behind you, the palace holds its silent royal figures, its long corridors, and the bell whose ringing has altered the fate of more than one world. Ahead, the avenues extend towards the place where the children first arrived. The city remains formal and ruined, its tower standing in orderly rows despite the absence of every inhabitant. No animal stirs beside the walls, and no human figure appears at any window. Charn is still dead, even though its last queen now walks through it. You cross the public square with Jadis moving several paces ahead. Her strength gives her stride an unusual certainty, and the children seem to hurry simply to remain near her. Diggory looks back once at the palace, perhaps remembering the warning he ignored. Polly does not look back at all. Around you, the empty buildings hold the faded remains of a civilization that had believed itself permanent. Carved signs hang above doorways, but their letters are unfamiliar. A dry fountain stands at the center of the square, its basin filled with dust instead of water. The absence of sound reaches every corner. Even the children's breathing becomes part of the landscape, small and temporary beneath the dead sky. At the far end of the avenue, the gateway appears between two buildings, marked by the faint shimmer of the pool that connects Charn with the wood. Its light is softer than the palace radiance, and its colors seem almost alive against the gray city. Jadis sees it and increases her pace. Diggory reaches for Polly's hand, while Polly catches at his sleeve to slow him. The queen turns, and her expression makes it clear that she will not be left behind. You feel the cold air move across your face as the children approach the pool, carrying no scent of earth, smoke, flowers, or rain. Charn offers no final sound of farewell. Its silence remains unbroken except for the quickening footsteps. The pool's surface reflects a different kind of light, one that seems to contain distance, trees, and the promise of movement. Diggory steps towards it, knowing that the ring will carry him back to the wood. Polly follows close behind, and Jadis comes after them with the calm certainty of a ruler entering a conquered chamber. The children leave Charn with Jadis because Diggory has awakened her, and because the bell has placed the queen's fate beside their own. For one last moment, you stand at the edge of the dead city and see the palace above the empty streets. The silent rulers remain inside, dust lies upon the steps, and the sky contains no birds, clouds, or weather. Then the world of Charn falls away as the children pass through the gateway. The grey streets, formal towers, and lifeless palace recede into a distance that is difficult to measure. You feel the air change before you see the trees, and the stale dryness of Charn gives way to the softer atmosphere of the wood. Yet the memory of the abandoned world remains with you. The metallic note of the bell seems to linger beneath the returning sounds of leaves and water. Jadis has left the dead city, but the deplorable word has travelled with her as a hidden history. Behind the children, Charn waits in silence, while ahead, another world begins to receive its unexpected queen. You are standing among the trees of the wood between the worlds, where the air is mild and motionless, and where every pool holds a different destination beneath its green surface. The leaves scarcely move above you. Their colour is neither the bright green of spring nor the tired brown of autumn, but a quiet shade that seems to belong to all seasons together. Water lies around the roots, perfectly still, reflecting branches, trunks, and the pale shapes of distant worlds. The metallic note from Charn has faded, though its memory remains somewhere behind your thoughts. Beside you, Diggory watches Jadis with unease, while Polly keeps close enough to reach his hand. Andrew stands apart, his face grey with apprehension, and the great queen looks upon the wood as though it were merely a corridor between rooms. She has travelled from Charn through the wood between the worlds, carrying the weight of an ancient empire into a place where nothing has yet been conquered. The children have already learned that the pools are doors, although the doors require no hinges, handles, or guardians. Each surface trembles faintly when a traveller approaches, and the colours beneath the water shift like clouds seen through deep glass. Diggory remembers the pool that brought them from London, and he remembers the ring that carried them there. Now he thinks of Earth, not because Earth is safe, but because it is familiar. Jadis must be removed from the wood before she studies its passages more carefully. She must be taken away from Charn, away from the green quiet, and away from any world where her authority might grow. Diggory reaches towards the ring, speaking with the seriousness of someone who has accepted responsibility too late. Polly watches his fingers. Andrew begins to whisper that none of this is his doing, although the dust from his experiment still clings to his cuffs. You move with them beneath the low branches, where the ground gives slightly beneath your shoes and the roots rise in soft ridges across the path. The wood has no wind, yet the leaves carry a faint rustling, as though each tree were breathing in its sleep. A cool scent of water and bark surrounds you. The pools remain dark between the trunks, edged with moss and tiny pale flowers. No bird calls from the branches, and no insect breaks the silence. That stillness makes Jadis seem even more conspicuous, for her bright figure appears too hard and deliberate for such a gentle place. Gold catches the dim light along her clothing, and the cold radiance of her face stands apart from the softened colours around her. The children's footsteps sound small beside her measured stride. Andrew's breathing is quick and uneven. Diggory guides you towards the pool that leads to London, while the Queen follows without permission, certain that every path exists for her. At the edge of the pool, Diggory understands that words will not persuade Jadis to wait. She has not come to Earth through invitation, and she has no reason to obey a child who has interrupted her journey. When the surface opens beneath the ring, the children enter first, their bodies passing through the green water without resistance. Jadis steps after them with the confidence of someone crossing a palace threshold. Andrew follows last, splashing awkwardly as Polly pulls him onward. In a moment, the wood is gone, and you are moving through a darkness filled with colourless light. The passage feels neither long nor short, because distance has lost its ordinary meaning. Then the water rises around you, and the familiar world receives you with a jolt. Jadis travels from Charn through the wood between the worlds and enters Earth before Narnia has been created. The ancient queen has reached London before the first trees of Narnia have opened their leaves. Rain has fallen over London, leaving the paving stones dark and shining beneath a pale afternoon sky. You emerge into a busy street where wheels pass close to the curb. Umbrellas lean against the weather, and shop windows hold blurred reflections of moving figures. Coal smoke drifts between the buildings, mixing with rainwater, damp wool, and the warm, sharp smell of horse sweat. Hooves strike wet paving stones in quick, uneven rhythms. The city presses around you on every side, crowded, noisy, and enclosed by brick fronts that rise higher than the trees of the wood. Jadis steps from the pool's magic into this ordinary street, and her bright, imperious presence seems almost luminous against the grey pavement. People turn to stare. A woman drops her umbrella. Somewhere nearby, a policeman shouts for the traffic to stop. The children stand in the roadway, soaked and bewildered, while Andrew clutches the edge of his coat and looks as though he has awakened inside a dream. For a brief time, Jadis mistakes the ordinary city for a provincial place within her own universe. The buildings do not impress her. The people appear poorly dressed, physically slight, and entirely unprepared for command. She studies the shop fronts and passing vehicles with the expression of a sovereign inspecting a conquered village. Her eyes move across the crowd without curiosity, resting only on whatever might carry her farther or obey her more quickly. Diggory tries to explain that this is London, a city on earth, and that they must leave before the authorities gather. Jadis listens, as though the information concerns a minor district. When a gentleman objects to her standing in the road, she turns towards him, and the force of her attention makes him step backwards. Andrew recognizes the change in the air. He has seen that power before, in the palace of Charn, and the memory of the silent statues returns to him with painful clarity. The rain gathers in fine beads along your sleeves, while water runs in narrow streams beside the curb. Gas lamps have begun to glow, their reflections trembling in the shallow puddles. The street smells of wet leather, soot, and the heavy warmth rising from horses that have been working since morning. Cab wheels pass with a rattling clatter, striking loose stones and sending fans of muddy water against the iron railings. Policemen shout over the gathering bystanders, calling for people to move aside. Nobody understands why the disturbance has begun. They see an unusually tall woman, several children, an older man, and a frightened animal somewhere near the road. They do not see Charn, the bell, or the power that once ended a world. Jadis stands motionless amid the confusion, her pale face untouched by embarrassment. Around you, London continues to move, yet its ordinary sounds seem thinner beside the silence that follows her commands. Jadis demands obedience rather than asking for help. She speaks to the nearest policeman as though he were a servant who has delayed an order, and she expects him to provide transport at once. The man raises his hand and tells her to remain where she is. His words are firm, but his voice does not carry authority over her. Diggory steps between them, asking Jadis to come away quietly. He explains that the police will not understand her, that Earth is not prepared for her presence, and that further attention will make their return more difficult. Jadis dismisses him with a glance. She does not recognize the limits of this world because she does not believe that ordinary people can impose limits upon her. When a cab horse shies beside the curb, she reaches out, catches the bridle, and takes hold of the animal's head. The hansom cab stops with a hard jerk, and the driver cries out in alarm. The horse's hooves scrape against the wet stones as it resists the unfamiliar hand upon its bridle. Leather creaks beneath the strain, and the cab springs groan under the sudden halt. Rain taps on the curved roof, then slides in shining lines down the black-painted panels. Coal smoke drifts low between the wheels, and the animal's breath rises in pale bursts. Frank, the cab driver, leans forward from his seat, staring at Jadis with open disbelief. He sees a stranger holding his horse, as if the creature were no more troublesome than a dog. Behind him, traffic begins to crowd against the halted vehicle. A policeman calls from somewhere beyond the umbrellas, while several bystanders murmur that the woman must be mad. The enclosed cab smells of damp wood, old leather, wet straw, and the warm body of the horse. Jadis's bright figure dominates the street, and every grey surface seems to deepen around her. Frank tries to pull the reins free, but Jadis's hand remains steady. The horse lowers its head, trembling beneath her strength, and the cab tilts slightly as the harness tightens. Diggory tells her to release the animal. He speaks quickly because he understands that the scene is becoming impossible to control. Jadis does not answer him at once. She examines the horse, the cab, and the complicated arrangement of harness as though she were deciding whether this crude device might serve a royal purpose. Frank calls for assistance and looks towards the policemen, but they hesitate before approaching. The children's experiment has brought an ancient conqueror into the modern world, and modern London has no language for what it sees. Andrew takes a step away from the cab. He says that he never intended to bring anyone from Charn, and his words disappear beneath the traffic and the rising voices. You hear the horse shift its weight, one hoof striking the paving stones with a nervous metallic sound. The cab wheels stand in a shallow gutter filled with brown rainwater, and each movement sends a soft ripple towards the curb. Nearby, a tram bell rings twice before falling silent. A policeman pushes through the crowd, his boots slipping slightly on the wet surface, while another calls for the roadway to be cleared. Bystanders gather beneath umbrellas, their faces appearing and disappearing behind veils of rain. Frank's coat is dark at the shoulders, and a narrow line of water runs from the brim of his hat. Inside the cab, the leather seat gives a faint enclosed creak whenever the vehicle shifts. The horse smells of sweat, mud, and stable straw. Above these ordinary impressions, Jadis remains almost dazzling, her pale clothing and upright posture refusing the weather, the noise, and the confusion of London. Diggory now realizes that Jadis must not remain on Earth. Her strength has already disrupted the street, and her contempt for the people around her makes any peaceful explanation impossible. If she continues through London, she may discover that the city contains weapons, institutions, and crowds large enough to become useful to her. She may also learn that fear can be organized. Diggory cannot allow her to establish herself in this world, even though he has no clear plan for taking her elsewhere. He tells her that the cab will carry them away from the police, and he promises that another pool can be reached from a quieter place. Jadis agrees only because the vehicle offers movement. She orders Frank to drive, naming no destination, and Frank looks from her hand to the horse, as though waiting for the madness to pass. When the Queen releases the bridle, the animal surges forward. The handsome cab rolls into the traffic with a sudden pull that presses you against the curved interior wall. Wheels rattle over the wet stones, and the horse's hooves strike a rapid pattern beneath the floorboards. Rain ticks against the roof while the city slides past in broken glimpses through the small windows. You see shop signs, iron railings, blurred faces, and lamps shining like soft coins in the grey afternoon. Frank calls to the horse, trying to keep the animal steady among carts and carriages. Policemen shout behind you, but their voices become indistinct as the cab gathers speed. The smell of coal smoke enters through the cracks, mingling with leather, horse sweat, and damp timber. Jadis sits upright, scarcely moving when the cab jolts. Diggory braces himself beside the children, while Andrew grips the door and watches London recede. The cab and horse carry the group away from central London, though nobody within the vehicle understands where the road will end. Frank is a practical man, accustomed to fares who give poor directions, drunken passengers who lose their hats, and horses that grow impatient at crowded crossings. He's not accustomed to a towering woman who gives orders without knowing the streets, nor to children who speak of other worlds in frightened voices. Yet he does what seems possible. He keeps both hands upon the reins and chooses roads broad enough for the horse to pass. Jadis asks whether the surrounding buildings belong to a great city. When Frank answers that they are in London, she declares that the place resembles a provincial town. The statement is delivered without mockery because, within her experience, London truly is small. Diggory hears the words and feels the scale of her former empire more clearly than any explanation could provide. The Queen sees weakness everywhere. Even the crowded streets appear to her as evidence that Earth has not yet learned how power should be arranged. The cab moves beneath rows of darkening buildings, and the rain becomes finer, almost like mist. Every passing wheel leaves a black trail on the roadway. Horses snort beneath their harnesses, and the smell of wet hair rises whenever the traffic closes around you. Gaslight settles over the pavement in small pools, touching brass fittings, umbrella handles, and the edges of puddles. The cab's suspension rocks gently beneath your body, though each pothole brings a heavier knock from the wooden frame. Leather rubs against leather inside the enclosed compartment. Frank's voice reaches you through the forward opening, low and strained, as he speaks to the horse. Jadis's brightness remains visible even in the dim interior, a cool and severe line against the dark upholstery. Diggory's coat is damp at the cuffs. Andrew's hands tremble whenever the horse quickens, and Polly listens to the street as though its noises might reveal a way home. Andrew tries to distance himself from the consequences of his magic. He insists that the rings were made for visiting the pools, not for bringing queens from dead worlds into London. He says that Jadis chose to follow them, as though choice alone could remove his responsibility. Diggory answers that Andrew gave them the means to travel, and that his carelessness made the meeting possible. The older man refuses to look directly at Jadis. He remembers the moment in the ruined palace when the Queen spoke of her final act, and he fears that she might repeat it on Earth. His hands close around the edge of the seat, but he offers no useful advice. Jadis hears their argument and shows no interest in assigning blame. To her, the people in the cab are instruments. The children open the door. Frank provides the horse. Andrew carries the knowledge of the rings. Each person is valuable only while serving her movement. At a turn in the road, the cab leans sharply, and you hear the harness strain above the clatter of the wheels. Rainwater spills from the roof edge in a thin curtain. The horse's breath comes faster, warm against the cold air, while mud spatters the lower panels. Frank's boots press against the footboard as he steadies the carriage. Street lamps pass at regular intervals, their glow entering through the window and fading across the leather seats. Behind the glass, London becomes a succession of quiet interiors and sudden crowds. A butcher closes a door. A woman gathers a child beneath her umbrella. Two policemen run along the pavement before losing sight of the cab. Nobody can see the hidden passage that brought Jadis here. Nobody can understand the supernatural cause of the disturbance. To the bystanders, the event is merely an alarming woman, a stolen cab, and an unusually frightened driver moving through the rain. Jadis begins to question Diggory about the other worlds. She wants to know whether Earth has a ruler, whether its rulers possess armies, and whether the people obey because they fear punishment or because they understand their inferiority. Diggory answers as briefly as possible. He says that Earth is governed by many countries, that London belongs to a kingdom, and that the police are not servants of a single queen. Jadis considers this arrangement and finds it defective. She asks why the people are permitted to crowd together without visible purpose. She asks why the streets contain so many vehicles, yet no guards stand beside them. Her questions make the city sound like a poorly managed province. When Diggory repeats that she must leave, she tells him to find the nearest pool and prepare the way. She does not promise to follow his instructions. She simply assumes that the passage will open because she has ordered it to open. Outside, the rain has begun to weaken, leaving the streets polished beneath the evening light. The clouds remain low over the rooftops, and coal smoke gathers beneath them in a faint brown veil. Hooves continue their steady striking, though the sound is softer on wider roads. The cab wheels hiss through damp grit and occasionally knock against a drain cover. Frank glances back whenever the horse passes a junction, watching the passengers through the small opening. Jadis appears to be made of the same cold light as the lamps, though her figure is sharper and more commanding. The children sit close together, their shoulders touching whenever the cab sways. Andrew has lowered his head. Diggory watches the passing streets, searching for some place where the rings might be used without witnesses. The enclosed creak of leather and wood rises and falls around you, creating a slow rhythm beneath the distant shouts and bells. The route carries you farther from the heart of London, though the streets remain busy with carts, pedestrians, and hired carriages. Frank chooses a quieter road when he can, but the horse is still guided through a world of noise and movement. Jaddy seems amused by the confusion. She describes the people as weak, and the children hear no exaggeration in her voice. She believes strength should be visible in the body and immediately obeyed by everyone nearby. Ordinary Londoners, with their umbrellas and tired faces, appear to her as a population without dignity. Diggory asks her to remain seated and silent until they find a suitable place. Jaddy turns towards him, and the cab seems to grow smaller around her. She reminds him that she destroyed Charn when its people defied her. The words settle heavily in the compartment. Andrew closes his eyes, while Frank keeps his attention fixed upon the road. The horse's shoes strike a patch of uneven paving, producing a bright sequence of knocks beneath the cab. The vehicle sways, then steadies, its wooden joints answering with low groans. Along the roadway, rainwater runs beside the curb in narrow silver lines. The air has grown colder, and the smell of wet stone is stronger than the coal smoke. Frank's horse leaves dark hoofprints that quickly fill with water. A policeman appears at a crossing and raises his arm, but Frank drives on after Jaddy gives an order from behind him. Somewhere behind the cab, a whistle sounds. The noise fades as distance widens. Inside, the leather cushions hold the warmth of previous passengers, while the roof keeps the rain at a muted remove. Jaddy's presence changes the atmosphere without any visible motion. The cab remains a small London vehicle, yet it carries a queen from Charn, 3 children, a frightened uncle, and the uncertain future of worlds not yet born. Diggory knows that Earth cannot be the final destination. He has seen enough of Jaddy to understand what would happen if she remained among people who mistook her power for theatrical behavior. At first, they might laugh or argue. Then they would obey, because fear often begins with confusion. Jaddy would search for influence, weapons, and followers. The modern world would respond with laws and force, but neither would address the deeper danger of an ancient will that had already destroyed a civilization. Diggory tells Polly that they must reach the wood between the worlds again. He cannot explain how they will find a pool without returning to the house, and he cannot make Jaddy surrender the rings. Yet the thought of another world has become necessary. The children's experiment has opened a path that cannot remain open in the middle of London. Somewhere beyond Earth, another place must receive the Queen. The city gradually thins around you. Buildings stand farther apart, and patches of dark garden appear behind iron fences. Rain clings to bare branches and drips upon the pavement with small, separate sounds. The air carries less smoke, though the scent of coal remains in the folds of the cab's curtains. Frank's horse settles into a more regular pace, and the wheels roll over smoother ground. Street lamps glow along the road, spaced widely enough to leave long intervals of shadow between them. The children speak quietly, their words covered by the rocking vehicle. Jaddy sits with one hand resting upon the door, her fingers still and pale. Andrew watches her from beneath lowered brows. Frank hears enough of the conversation to know that the passengers are not merely lost. He does not know that a new world waits beyond the next ring, nor that the horse beneath him will become part of a story larger than London. The driver finally asks where they intend to go. His voice carries irritation as well as fear, because the cab has been taken without an agreed fare and the road is becoming unfamiliar. Diggory answers that they are searching for a quiet place where the woman can be left safely. Jaddy corrects him, saying that she will not be left anywhere. Frank looks back again. The Queen's gaze meets his, and he turns quickly towards the horse. She commands him to continue until the road opens. Her tone leaves no room for discussion. Diggory repeats that she must return with them, but Jadis says that she has already left Charn and will not be ordered backwards by children. The argument passes through the narrow cab like a cold draught. Andrew murmurs that the Queen is right about one thing: nobody can force her. Diggory hears the admission and understands how little control they possess. A fresh shower begins, fine enough to seem suspended in the air before touching the roof. Droplets gather along the edges of the windows, turning lamps into soft, broken stars. The horse's hooves make a deep, damp rhythm upon the road, and the cab wheels send water whispering beneath the axle. Coal smoke returns in a thin stream from distant chimneys. The smell of wet wool fills the compartment whenever the forward flap lifts. Frank's coat brushes the wood as he adjusts his posture. Leather creaks from the seat, the reins, and the harness outside, forming a low network of patient sounds. Jadis remains perfectly composed. Her face is bright against the dim interior, and her clothing gives off a faint impression of warmth despite the cold. Diggory's hands are clenched. Polly's sleeve touches yours as the cab turns. The city behind you becomes quieter, while the unseen worlds ahead draw nearer. The children decide that the rings must be used before Jadis can seize them. Diggory explains the danger in a low voice, pointing towards the small box that holds the means of passage. Polly understands immediately. Andrew notices their movement and reaches for the box, not to help, but to prevent another accident. He says that the rings have already caused enough trouble and that the safest course is to return home. Diggory tells him that home is no longer safe while Jadis remains in London. For a moment, all four children hold their positions within the narrow compartment, surrounded by the motion of the cab. Jadis watches them without surprise. She has recognized the importance of the objects, and she expects them to be placed in her hands. Her command is quiet but absolute. She orders Diggory to give her the rings. The children do not answer. Frank hears only a sudden silence behind him and urges the horse onward. The cab passes under a line of trees where rainwater falls from the branches in heavy drops. Darkness gathers across the roof, and the lamps become more distinct against the blackness. Hooves splash through a shallow hollow, then climb onto firm ground. The wheels rattle over a bridge or a narrow crossing, and the sound of water rises briefly beneath you. Frank's horse smells strongly of sweat now, its body warmed by the long drive. Inside the cab, the air is close, and the leather seats have become damp at their edges. Jadis's presence fills the limited space with a pressure that seems almost physical. Andrew presses his back against the side panel, keeping as far from her as the compartment permits. Diggory holds the box near his chest. Polly watches the door, prepared to move when he gives the signal. Beyond the windows, London continues its evening business, unaware that a passage between worlds is about to open again. Jadis reaches towards the box, and Diggory pulls it away. Her movement is quick enough to make the cab lurch when he recoils. She could take it from him, but she appears to be measuring the consequences of force. The Queen has no fear of the children, yet she understands that the rings are small and easily dropped. Diggory tells her that the other world will offer her a better kingdom than Earth. He does not say that this promise will lead her towards Narnia, because Narnia does not yet exist. He speaks only of a place where she may find room, distance, and subjects who have not heard of her. Jadis studies him, perhaps recognizing the shape of a bargain. Then she commands him to take her there. Her demand is not a request for guidance. It is an order given to the person who appears most capable of opening the next door. Diggory feels the weight of what he has begun. Rainwater streams from the roof in narrow lines, and the window glass trembles with each turn of the wheels. The road has become darker, bordered by hedges and tall trees whose branches meet above the cab. Frank's voice is quieter now, reduced to brief murmurs directed towards the horse. Hooves strike wet paving stones with a softened pulse, while the wheels hiss along the margins of the road. The enclosed creak of leather and wood surrounds you like the timbers of a small boat. Somewhere beyond the trees, a dog barks once and falls silent. The city's smoke lingers as a faint taste in the cold air, mixed with mud and horse sweat. Jaddy's brightness gives the compartment its only clear shape. Diggory's face is lit from one side, while Polly and Andrew remain partly hidden in shadow. The night seems to gather around the vehicle, carrying London away behind you. Frank begins to suspect that his passengers are escaped performers, criminals, or members of some strange religious gathering. He has seen enough of London to know that unusual scenes often receive ordinary explanations. The woman might be a foreign noblewoman. The children might belong to a traveling family. The older man might be drunk, ill, or pretending not to understand. Frank cannot explain why the horse obeys Jaddy's more readily than him, nor why the air inside the cab feels so cold. He decides that reaching a police station would be sensible, but the Queen's instructions and the children's frightened urgency pull him in different directions. Diggory gives a new destination, then changes it when he sees a group of constables ahead. Frank turns the cab away. The horse responds with a tired toss of its head. The road bends through shadow, and the group travels farther from central London without finding safety. The final lights of the denser streets disappear behind the trees, leaving only occasional glimmers through the rain. Wet leaves brush the upper roof, producing a dry whisper against the steady patter of water. Mud softens the sound of the wheels, though the horse's hooves still land with deliberate force. Frank's hands are stiff from holding the reins. Within the cab, damp fabric leather and would have taken on the close scent of a long journey. Jaddy's looks towards the dark window, believing that the land beyond it may belong to some lesser province. She has not yet understood that Earth is only a temporary stage in her passage. Diggory feels the rings in the box and thinks of the green pools between worlds. Polly leans towards him, ready to help. Andrew sits very still, attempting to deny the connection between his magic and the Queen's arrival. The vehicle moves onward, carrying an impossible company beneath the patient rain. At last, Diggory tells Frank to stop. The horse slows, its shoes sliding slightly before finding purchase on the wet road. The cab comes to rest beside a low wall where trees conceal the view from passing streets. Frank turns on his seat and asks whether the journey has ended. Diggory says that it has not, but that they must make another crossing. Jaddy's rises at once, and the roof seems too low to contain her. She commands the children to show her the door. Diggory steps down with the box in his hands. Polly follows, then Andrew, who looks towards the empty road as though hoping the police might appear. Frank remains beside the horse, holding the reins and watching the group gather in the rain. The cab and horse have become an unexpected vehicle for the travelling group, carrying them away from London's centre and towards the border of another world. No ordinary map records the place where they now stand. Rain falls through the branches in slow, heavy drops, landing upon the wall, the road, and the broad leather harness. The horse lowers its head and breathes into the darkness, while steam rises faintly from its nostrils. Frank's cab rocks once as the animal shifts position. Water shines along the spokes of the wheels and gathers beneath the iron rims. The smell of wet earth replaces much of the city's soot, though horse sweat remains warm and unmistakable nearby. Policemen still search somewhere behind you, but their voices have vanished. No bystander knows where the disturbance has gone, and no one could imagine that London's missing cab is waiting beside a hidden passage. Jaddy stands beneath the dripping trees like a figure cut from pale metal. Diggory opens the box. The rings gleam briefly in his hand. Andrew turns away, while Polly watches the dark space between the trees where a pool may be waiting. Diggory chooses a ring and holds it towards the ground. The familiar green radiance appears slowly, spreading across the wet earth without disturbing the leaves. A pool forms where no pool had been, its surface clear and dark beneath the rain. Frank steps backwards, dropping one rein before catching it again. The horse gives a low, uncertain sound. Jadis approaches the opening and sees the wood between the worlds reflected in its depth. She recognizes the place, though she does not understand its nature. Diggory tells her that the passage will lead to another world. He does not mention that the world is still being made, or that the first sound of its creation may soon be heard. Jadis orders him to enter. He refuses, saying that she must go first. The Queen's face hardens. For a moment, the rain, the cab, the horse, and the children remain motionless around the luminous pool. The ring's light falls across the road, turning every wet surface green. The cab's black panels reflect the glow in narrow, broken strips. Frank's face appears pale beneath his hat, and the horse's eyes catch the strange brightness as it raises its head. Leaves drip above you, each drop flashing before it disappears into the mud. The air has lost the smell of coal smoke and now carries water, moss, and the faint mineral scent of the new opening. Inside the cab, the leather seats remain dark and creased, holding the memory of London's roads. Jadis's radiance seems less isolated beside the pool because the green water gives her an answering color. Diggory grips the box tightly. Polly stands close to him. Andrew keeps his distance from the Queen, though there is nowhere truly far from her. The next world lies beneath the surface, silent and unprepared. Jadis steps into the pool without hesitation. The green light rises around her boots, then her knees, and then the bright outline of her body disappears into the water. Diggory follows, pulling Polly with him. Andrew hesitates until Frank tells him that remaining behind with the strange woman's horse is no sensible arrangement. The children enter together, and the road falls away. Frank, still holding the reins, is drawn forward by the movement of the ring. The horse resists, planting its hooves against the mud, but the cab shifts and begins to follow. Wood complains beneath the strain. Harness rings strike against one another. Frank reaches for the side of the vehicle, and the horse plunges into the green opening. You pass from London's rain into the darkness between worlds, carrying the cab, the horse, and the frightened driver beyond the limits of ordinary geography. Behind you, the city remains unaware of what has departed. The passage is colder than the road, though no wind touches your face. Green light surrounds the cab, filtering through the wet glass and tracing the outlines of Frank's hands, the horse's harness, and the wooden frame. Hooves make no sound here, yet the familiar motion continues, as if the vehicle were still moving across paving stones. The smell of rain fades, leaving leather, damp timber, and the warm breath of the horse. Jadis stands ahead, a pale shape within the green distance. Diggory calls to her, but his voice seems to travel only a short way. Polly's hand remains closed around his sleeve. Andrew has become silent. Frank's cab creaks with every unseen movement, an ordinary machine carried through an impossible road. The wood between the worlds waits beyond the darkness, and beyond the wood there is another darkness, deeper and wider, where Narnia has not yet been created. When the green passage opens again, trees surround you on every side. The wood receives the group with its old stillness, but the quiet has altered. Frank and the horse stand bewildered beside the cab, their forms damp from London, though no rain falls among the branches. Jadis emerges from the pool with an expression of impatient authority. Diggory looks towards the other pools, knowing that Earth is no longer the immediate danger. The children's experiment has carried an ancient conqueror into the modern world, and then drawn the modern world towards a place beyond its understanding. The contrast is complete around you. London had been crowded with streets, voices, policemen, smoke, and wheels, while the wood remains green, silent, and almost empty. Charn had possessed an empty palace beneath a dead sky. Now 3 places lie within the same journey: Charn's abandoned halls, London's crowded streets, and the wood's stillness. Frank speaks first, asking where the roads have gone. His voice sounds small among the trees. The horse turns its head towards him, searching for the familiar direction of a stable or a street. No answer comes from the pools. Their surfaces rest beneath the branches, reflecting leaves and faint light. Jadis pays no attention to Frank's confusion. She looks beyond the wood, towards a pool whose darkness seems deeper than the others. Diggory feels that something is approaching, although no sound has yet entered the still air. Andrew understands that the rings have carried them farther than he wished. He tells Diggory that they should return to London immediately. Diggory shakes his head. The Queen cannot remain in the wood, and she cannot be taken back to Charn. Another world must receive her. The decision weighs upon him as heavily as the box in his hands. Around you, the pools remain quiet, but the air seems to gather itself. Water lies between the roots like polished stone. The leaves hold no movement, and the branches form a high green ceiling above the travellers. Frank's cab appears strangely solid in this place, with its wheels, lamps, leather, and rain-darkened wood. The horse stamps once, making a sound that seems louder than it should. Jadis stands beside it, bright and severe, while the children keep close to the nearest pool. Andrew's fear has become a fixed expression rather than a passing emotion. The wood's stillness presses gently against every object from earth. Coal smoke has vanished. The road mud has begun to dry. Only the scent of wet leather and horse sweat remains as a reminder of London. Beyond the trees, an unseen world waits for the sound that will give it shape. Jadis asks whether this is the world she will rule. Diggory says that he does not know what lies beyond the next pool. The answer displeases her, but uncertainty has not weakened her belief in command. She orders him to proceed. Polly looks towards the quiet water and sees a faint brightness gathering beneath its surface. Andrew steps away from the group, saying that he wants no part in what follows. He has spent the journey trying to distance himself from the consequences of his magic, yet his fear cannot remove him from the scene. Frank remains beside the horse, bewildered but loyal to the animal he must bring home. Diggory understands that the journey has acquired its own momentum. Jadis came from Charn through the wood. The children brought her to earth by entering the London pool. Now the cab and horse, the Queen and the children, are drawn towards a new world. The green light beneath the chosen pool strengthens without brightening the surrounding trees. Its surface moves in slow circles, though no hand touches it. A deep vibration passes through the roots, the cab wheels, and the horse's harness. Frank feels it beneath his boots and looks down at the ground. Jadis lifts her head, listening with the attention of a ruler hearing distant music. Diggory opens the box once more. Polly takes his hand, and Andrew closes his eyes. The pools around you remain dark, preserving their countless silent destinations. Somewhere beyond the selected water, a voice begins to form. It is not yet a word, not yet a melody, but the first pressure of creation entering an empty place. The wood's stillness gives way to a gentler expectancy. Charn had ended in a single command. London had answered Jadis with noise and confusion. This new world begins with song. You stand beside the cab as the first notes spread through the wood, and the sound seems to pass through your body rather than reach you from a distance. The horse becomes still. Frank removes his hat without knowing why. Andrew looks up, his frightened face softened by wonder. Polly listens beside Diggory, while Jadis watches the glowing pool with an expression that contains impatience, calculation, and the faintest trace of unease. The children have carried her from Charn, through the wood between the worlds, into London, and now towards the place that will become Narnia. The ancient conqueror has entered the modern world, but the modern world has not been able to contain her. Her presence will follow the new creation like a dark inheritance. Later, in Narnia, Jadis will be remembered as the source of the White Witch's line, though that title has not yet been spoken. For now, the song continues, and a world opens beneath the water. The darkness beneath the water is not empty for long. Across its immense silence, A low music begins to travel, so faintly at first that it seems less like sound than the memory of sound. You are standing upon a smooth, dark surface where no shore can yet be found. The black sky above you remains without moon, cloud, or star. Beneath your feet, the world is waiting, still and unshaped, while cold air carries a deep vibration through the soles of your shoes. No lamp burns nearby, and no human hand has raised a wall, road, or roof. There is only water, darkness, and the distant movement of a voice that seems to belong to the whole space around you. The sound passes through the empty air without echo, gentle and immense, and the darkness begins to feel less like an absence than a place being quietly remembered. Then Aslan appears. He does not arrive by crossing a road or descending from a visible height, because there are no roads, heights, or distances in the new world. His presence simply becomes the first great living fact within the darkness, and everything else is measured from him. You see him only gradually, as though the darkness itself is learning how to reveal a shape. His mane gathers the scant light around his head, and his eyes hold a steadiness that makes the surrounding emptiness seem peaceful rather than frightening. His paws rest upon the unformed ground, although the ground has not yet risen into hills or valleys. Around him, the air trembles with the beginning of song. The music is deep enough to be felt in your chest, yet soft enough to leave every silence untouched. It moves across the empty space like a warm current beneath still water, carrying no words and requiring no instrument. Aslan sings, and the darkness answers by becoming visible. The first light does not burst across the sky in a sudden blaze. It gathers in long, pale threads, widening above you until the blackness is marked by a faint grey radiance. You are looking upward into a sky that opens slowly, layer by layer, with colours too delicate to possess ordinary names. A silver brightness lies along the horizon, though there is not yet any sun to cast it. Above that quiet edge, small points of fire awaken one after another, and the first stars appear in the deepening blue. They are scattered at first, as if placed by a careful hand, then multiplied until the heavens contain a gentle and ordered pattern. The air loses its absolute chill, while the dark surface beneath you begins to show a dim reflection of the new light. Nothing moves except the soft widening of the sky. Even the water seems to listen, carrying the low music beneath its surface. The stars continue to spread as Aslan's song rises and falls. Where the music becomes lower, the darkness seems to deepen into rich blue. Where the melody climbs, pale light appears above the unseen horizon. The heavens are not being decorated, but called into their proper places, as though each star has been waiting for its note. Your face is touched by a faint breeze, although no trees yet stand and no hills divide the air. The wind has a clean, almost mineral scent, mixed with the freshness of water that has never known a shore. Overhead, the stars multiply without haste, and their reflections tremble beneath you in long, broken lines. The black sky is now a field of blue-black depth, and the first light rests upon it like dust upon velvet. Aslan's voice remains near, surrounding you from every direction, while the empty air begins to possess distance, shape, and direction. Then the surface beneath you begins to move. The ground rises from the water in broad folds. The first hills lift themselves beneath the growing light, followed by valleys that open between them. You're carried upward upon a slow swelling of earth, with no violent shaking and no sudden crack to disturb the solemn progress of creation. A ridge forms nearby, its dark back emerging from the water, while a hollow settles beyond it and gathers a shining pool. Further away, mountains incline towards one another, making a long valley through which the new air can travel. The soil is black and wet, and small streams slip down the fresh slopes with a clear, quick sound. Under your hands, the ground feels cool and grainy, as though it has only just learned the meaning of firmness. Air is brighter now, touched by the first warmth of an unseen dawn. Aslan's song moves over the rising land, giving each contour its place. Hills become rounded and green, valleys deepen into quiet passages, and water finds channels between stones that have not existed until this moment. The world begins to possess a geography, though no map has yet been drawn and no boundary has been named. Around you, the newly raised earth releases the smell of wet soil after rain. Tiny rivulets glitter along the slopes, joining in shallow courses that make a soft, musical murmur. In the hollows, mist gathers close to the ground, while the higher ridges catch the first pale light. The stones are smooth and dark, washed clean by the waters, and the mud yields beneath your feet with a gentle pressure. No bird crosses the sky, and no leaf stirs in the stillness. Yet the valleys already seem prepared for voices, and the hills appear to be holding their breath. The song changes again, and the bare ground begins to receive its first covering. Green spreads from the valleys into the open spaces, delicate at first, then richer and more varied as grasses, ferns, mosses, and flowering plants rise together. You are standing beside a stream where the banks have become soft with fresh grass. Its blades bend beneath the moisture and shine as though each one contains a small piece of morning. Pale blossoms open among the green, some white as milk and others blue as the distant sky. Ferns unfurl beside smooth stones, and low plants release scents of sweetness, bitterness, and damp earth. The land has no old paths, yet your feet find natural places between the roots and flowers. A clear watercourse passes over pebbles, making a bright sound that seems almost like laughter, though no creature has yet made such a thing. In this windless land, the first leaves begin to rustle. The plants appear not as scattered accidents, but as a living pattern responding to the music. Vines curl around stones, reeds gather beside the water, and young trees push their roots into soil still warm from its rising. The bare valleys become meadows, and the dark hills acquire green shoulders beneath the starlit sky. A fragrance moves across the land, composed of crushed grass, wet bark, pale blossoms, and earth newly opened to the air. Leaves tremble without any visible breeze, answering a melody that seems to pass through their stems. Small flowers tilt towards the growing brightness, while delicate shoots lift themselves from the soil with quiet determination. The stream remains clear enough for you to see the rounded stones below its surface. Beyond it, the valleys fade into silver mist, and the hills hold their new green shapes beneath the stars. Aslan's voice summons more than plants. Beneath the soil, something begins to stir, and the earth opens in many places as the first animals rise into the light. You hear soft movements under the grass before you see their source. Moles press upward through the dark soil, their noses appearing among the roots, while rabbits emerge from shallow hollows with ears already alert. A stag lifts his head from the earth, his antlers wet with soil, and a family of foxes steps carefully onto the new grass. Birds come from the ground as well, shaking earth from their feathers before rising into the air. Lions, bears, elephants, horses, and creatures, unlike any known in London, gather upon the fresh land. Their bodies are complete from the first moment, and their eyes carry an astonishment that resembles thought. The animals do not merely breathe and move. They listen to Aslan's singing, and within their first moments of existence, they begin to speak and reason. You are close enough to hear the first voices forming around you, hesitant and uneven, as if language has been placed within the animals before they have learned how to use it. A crow asks where it is, and a mole replies that it is somewhere above the ground. Two rabbits discuss the taste of the grass, while a beaver wonders whether the water will remain in its channel. Their questions are simple, yet their minds are awake from the beginning. They inspect their paws, compare their shapes, and notice the differences between fur, feathers, horns, and scales. The gathering becomes an unfamiliar chorus, full of murmurs, questions, and quiet discoveries. The animal voices grow clearer as Aslan's song continues above them. A parrot repeats a phrase spoken by a nearby monkey, and the monkey objects that the parrot has added unnecessary flourishes. The horses speak in calm tones, discussing the softness of the meadow. A great elephant turns towards the mountains and describes the way the hills seem to curve around the valley. You stand among creatures who have no parents, memories, or long past, yet possess an immediate sense of themselves. Their first knowledge is not fear, but recognition. They know the grass beneath their feet, the streams between the stones, and the presence of Aslan before them. Some animals draw close to one another for comfort, while others examine the world with solemn attention. Their voices rise and fall in the clear air, becoming a living sound beneath the stars. Among the first horses, Strawberry raises his head. The animal has been brought from London with Frank, the cab driver, and now stands upon the newly formed grass with mud along his legs and wonder in his eyes. You are beside the horse as he turns towards Frank, who has arrived in his cab with the astonishment of a practical man placed inside an impossible landscape. The familiar vehicle rests awkwardly among flowers, its wheels damp from the journey through darkness. Frank's coat is still marked by the streets of London, and the reins lie across his hands. Strawberry looks towards him and speaks in a voice that is gentle, measured, and unmistakably intelligent. Frank steps back, staring at the animal, while the horse calmly explains that the grass is good and that the lion appears to be in charge. Around them, the other animals fall quiet enough to listen. Frank does not mistake the moment for an ordinary conversation. He understands that Strawberry has become one of the first animals to speak, and that this new world has given thought and language to creatures who possessed neither in the world he left behind. The horse's breath forms a faint cloud in the cool air, though the meadow is beginning to warm. His mane carries the scent of damp hay and fresh rain, familiar reminders of London stables transformed by the brightness of the new land. Nearby, the cab's metal fittings reflect the stars, while blossoms brush against its wheels. The animals gather in a wide circle, their voices now subdued, and the stream continues its clear passage through the valley. Frank's hand rests against Strawberry's neck, feeling the steady warmth beneath the coat. Aslan looks upon Frank, and the animals become quiet. The lion chooses the London cab driver to become Narnia's first king, not because Frank has sought authority, but because he has shown care towards the creature entrusted to him. You are standing beneath the open sky as Frank approaches Aslan with uncertainty. He has no crown, army, or knowledge of the country that has just come into being. His hands are rough from rains and work, and his face carries the tiredness of a man who has spent his life moving other people through crowded streets. Aslan speaks to him, and the animals listen. Frank is told that the new land requires a human ruler, someone able to understand both the speaking creatures and those who will later arrive. The cab driver bows his head, accepting the responsibility with quiet seriousness. The first king of Narnia wears no splendid robe. Frank stands in his ordinary clothes beside Strawberry, while the hills and valleys of the new kingdom extend around him beneath the stars. The animals begin to gather in patterns that resemble a court, though no courtly custom has yet been invented. The meadow smells of crushed grass beneath many feet, and the wet soil gives a soft sound whenever Frank shifts his weight. A breeze begins to move through the valley, bringing the scent of leaves and the clean brightness of running water. Strawberry's coat gleams chestnut in the starlight, while pale flowers bend along the edge of the stream. From the distant hills comes the faint rustle of young trees, their leaves making the first music of the land apart from Aslan's voice. Aslan gives Frank a new name for his office, and the animals accept the appointment. The land around them is called Narnia, and the name passes gently from voice to voice, becoming part of the world as surely as the rivers and hills. You hear the word Narnia spoken by Strawberry, then by a raven, and finally by a bear whose deep voice makes the syllables seem older than the mountains. Frank looks across the valley, seeing not the streets of London, but a country without roads, farms, or houses. The stars remain bright overhead, and the first light of dawn lies beyond the eastern hills. Narnia is still young enough that every sound seems to belong to its first day. Yet the name already gathers meaning, holding the green valleys, clear streams, and speaking animals within a single idea. The newly made country is quiet between the voices. Its hills rise in gentle tiers, and the valleys retain pools of shadow where the stars shine upon dark water. The grass remains wet against your ankles, while young leaves brush together above the banks. The air is free of smoke, traffic, and chimney soot, carrying only soil, flowers, bark, and the cool scent of streams. Far away, an animal calls, and another answers from a different hill. Their voices travel across the open country without obstruction, joining the first chorus of Narnia. Yet creation has not brought only goodness into the land. Jadis stands apart from the animals, an alien and hostile presence whose strength and pride have followed her from Charn into the new world. You can see her upon a rise beyond the meadow, where the grass has not yet fully covered the soil. Her figure is dark against the paling horizon, and her face remains composed beneath the new stars. She looks across Narnia as though judging a possession made without her permission. The animals draw away from the hill, remembering the violence carried from Charn. Frank watches her carefully, while Strawberry lowers his head and speaks in a warning murmur. Aslan does not strike her, and Jadis does not approach him. For time, she simply observes. Jadis withdraws from the new land, but she does not become harmless. The threat later associated with the White, which begins at the same moment as Narnia's birth, although that title has not yet been spoken, and the future winter remains far away. A colder current moves over the hill where Jadis stood, carrying no scent of flowers or wet earth. The animals notice it before the people do, and several turn towards the southern valleys with unease. The bright air of Narnia remains around you, yet the memory of Charn has entered it like a dark stain beneath clear water. Leaves continue to rustle, streams continue to run, and pale blossoms open along the banks. Still, the new kingdom contains a danger that has not left it. Aslan turns to Diggory. The boy is instructed to fetch an apple from a distant garden, and the task carries a purpose greater than the simple taking of fruit. You stand at the edge of a quiet path where the ground slopes towards a wooded country beyond the first hills. Diggory listens as Aslan explains that an apple must be brought from a particular garden, far from the valley where the animals have gathered. The boy's face is pale with weariness, but he understands that the journey concerns Narnia's safety. Polly remains near him, and Strawberry watches with a solemn intelligence that seems almost human. Beyond the path, the new trees hold their leaves still, waiting for the wind to pass through them. The route towards the garden leads across country that is still being formed. You walk beside Diggory through meadows where the grass is short and shining, then beneath branches that have only recently unfolded. The earth remains soft along the path, and your shoes gather a little dark soil at every step. Water slips between mossy stones, while small white flowers grow close to the roots. The sky above the trees is a deep blue scattered with stars, though the eastern edge is brightening. No bird sings in the branches, but the first leaves whisper overhead, making a sound like distant rain. The garden lies beyond a wall that seems older than the land around it. Diggory enters its quiet enclosure and finds the apple tree standing at the center, heavy with fruit whose brightness appears almost golden in the dim light. You are beneath the branches of the distant garden, where the air is warmer and stiller than in the valleys below. The wall is covered with dark moss, and the soil inside is rich, black, and carefully settled. Leaves overlap above your head, forming a green roof beneath which the stars appear only in fragments. The apples hang among the branches with smooth skins and a faint inner glow. Their scent is crisp and sweet, carrying the promise of nourishment as well as something deeper. Diggory reaches upward, and the leaves move softly around his hand. He takes one apple and carries it back towards Aslan. Jadis attempts to claim the fruit for herself, sensing that it contains a power capable of changing her, but Diggory brings the apple to the lion instead. You return through the garden path with Diggory, holding the apple carefully while the surrounding darkness thins into morning. The fruit is cool against his palms, and its skin reflects the first light in a pale, luminous sheen. Behind the wall, the branches remain still, and the air smells of damp leaves and stone. Beyond the garden, Narnia's hills rise in long green folds. The sound of water reaches you from the valleys, joined by the distant voices of animals beginning their day. Aslan receives the apple and instructs that it be planted in Narnia. The fruit is placed in the soil, and from it grows a tree intended to protect the kingdom from Jadis and the danger she represents. You stand beside the planting place as Frank and the animals gather around a small hollow in the earth. Diggory lowers the apple into the dark soil, and Aslan covers it with earth that remains warm beneath your fingers. For a few moments, nothing seems to happen. Then a slender shoot rises, followed by a stem, branches, and shining leaves. The tree grows with remarkable speed, yet each movement is quiet, almost tender. Roots settle below the ground, while pale blossoms open among the young leaves. The scent of fresh wood spreads through the valley. The protective tree becomes part of Narnia's first landscape. Its branches rise above the meadow, and its leaves catch the dawn in silver-green flashes. The animals stand beneath it, understanding that it has been placed there for the safety of the kingdom. Clear water passes nearby, reflecting the tree's delicate outline. Pale blossoms drift across the grass, and a faint sweetness hangs in the air where the roots have disturbed the soil. The bark is smooth and light, still marked by the freshness of its growth. Bees have not yet appeared, but the branches already seem prepared for their future hum. Beyond the tree, Strawberry speaks quietly with a beaver, discussing whether the fruit will return in another season. Frank is no longer merely a cab driver carried from London. Aslan confirms him as the first king of Narnia, and the animals recognize in him a ruler connected to the human world beyond the new country. You are near the top of a low hill when Frank receives the final sign of his appointment. The land spreads below you in valleys, rivers, meadows, and wooded slopes, all shining beneath the newly risen sun. Frank looks across the country with a mixture of affection and bewilderment. Strawberry stands beside him, speaking calmly about the excellent grass and the unusual quality of the light. Around them, the animals gather without fear, forming a court whose customs will develop slowly. Narnia has its first king, though it has not yet built a throne. The day warms the stones and dries the grass. Sunlight reaches the hills in long bands, while the shadowed valleys retain the coolness of night. Leaves turn softly in the wind, and the first insects move among the flowers. The stream beside the meadow runs clear over pale pebbles, carrying small reflections of sky and blossom. Under the protective tree, the soil remains dark and moist, and its roots hold the new earth in place. In the distance, animals call across the open country, their speech mixing with ordinary cries until the whole land seems to converse. Frank remembers Helen. His wife has remained in London, and the first king of Narnia cannot accept the kingdom as complete while she is absent from it. You stand with Frank beside the tree as he speaks of Helen, describing her patience, strength, and practical kindness. He explains that she would understand the animals, the fields, and the work required to make a home. Strawberry listens, occasionally lowering his head to crop the grass, while the other creatures remain respectfully quiet. Frank's voice becomes softer when he mentions London, where Helen is waiting without knowing that another country has just been born. The morning air moves through the tree above him. Aslan later brings Helen from Earth. She arrives in Narnia without ceremony, yet the kingdom seems to settle more fully when she joins Frank beneath the open sky. You see Helen standing beside the cab, one hand resting against its familiar door while the green country extends around her. Her clothing belongs to London, but the light touches it with Narnia's clear brightness. Frank crosses the meadow to meet her, and the two hold one another beside the stream. The animals watch with curiosity, while Strawberry speaks a quiet greeting that makes Helen laugh softly. Around them, the tree's leaves move in the fresh wind, releasing a scent of pale blossoms and young bark. Helen becomes the first Queen of Narnia. With Frank beside her, she forms the beginning of a human royal house, joining London to the created kingdom beneath the new stars. You walk with the first king and queen through the meadow, where animals make room for them along the stream. Helen touches the leaves of the protective tree and asks about its purpose. Frank explains what he can, while Strawberry supplies details he has understood from Aslan's words. The animals gather around them, and the valley becomes a place of conversation rather than ceremony. No palace stands nearby, but the hills provide a natural boundary, and the river offers a clear path through the green country. Narnia is made, though it is not yet safe. The land contains light, stars, hills, valleys, plants, animals, speech, reason, a royal family, and a tree intended to guard the kingdom against jaddies. You are beneath the branches as evening returns, and the first stars appear above the leaves. The ground has dried into firm paths, while the rivers continue their clear movement between the hills. Fresh grass bends around your feet, and the scent of wet soil remains in the shaded places. From the meadow comes the unfamiliar chorus of animals speaking together, their voices rising and falling in thoughtful discussion. Somewhere beyond the southern ridges, Jaddies remains dangerous, and the future white, which has already begun to cast a long shadow. The story of this creation is associated with 1955. Its fictional events belong to Narnia's First Age, long before later winters, battles, and royal journeys, when the world was still young enough for every tree and river to possess the freshness of a first morning. You are standing at the edge of the new kingdom as darkness gathers peacefully over the valleys. The stars are clearer than those above London, and the air carries the clean scent of water, leaves, and newly planted wood. Frank and Helen remain beneath the tree, while the animals settle among the grass and speak in low voices. The hills hold their green forms against the sky. Beyond them, the unknown future waits, while Narnia rests beneath its protective branches. Aslan's song fades into the ordinary sounds of a living country. The First Age closes with a created kingdom, a human royal house, and a tree standing between Narnia and the danger that entered with its birth. Around you, the wind moves gently through the leaves, though the land was once without even a blade of grass. Clear water passes beneath the starlight, and pale blossoms release their quiet fragrance into the evening air. The animals continue their low conversation across the meadow, their voices blending into a calm, unfamiliar music. Strawberry stands near the tree, one of Narnia's first speaking creatures. Frank and Helen remain together as king and queen. Above them, the stars hold their places, and the darkness is no longer empty.